Okay, it is 12 o'clock and we are ready for our third presentation. I will turn it over to City Manager Mr. Scragg to introduce anyone, and we'll go.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to start by thanking this group and their willingness to meet with us at noon. Things are going well in terms of schedule. When we put this together, I wasn't sure whether we'd be running behind, but we had some things come up that kind of necessitated us taking a short lunch in the room and asking you to be here at noon. So we appreciate that. The other thing I would tell you, Commissioners, is we discussed early on that we had a minimum project size of 150 units, thinking that we need to be flexible and that it might end up putting projects together to accomplish the 500 goal. Perry Reid was a common partner on two proposals, and so I'll let them explain further, but we quickly identified that those two projects, number-wise and with the commonality of Perry Reid, might be able to come together as a combined project to hit the 500 goal. So Tom Houston is the person I'm going to turn it over to, and then I'll let him make introductions and explain the proposal and the relationships.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the Commission. As indicated, my name is Tom Houston. I'm General Counsel of Perry Reid Properties, which is a professional property management company based in Lincoln, Nebraska. With me today is Dave Wells, who's the President of Key Construction based in Wichita, Kansas. Also is David Galicchio, who's the General Counsel of Anthony Properties, one of our partners from the Dallas area, and also Alex Perry from Perry Reid Construction, also based in Lincoln. As indicated, we have two projects that we have kind of combined for purposes of responding to the RFP. Who's going to be controlling the, okay. You can see that Perry Reid Properties is the common denominator of the two projects. Internally, we've been calling one project Magnolia Commons based upon the fact that it's close to Magnolia Road. And in that project, Key Construction would be the general contractor, and it's being designed by Carl Yeager out of Kansas City. Perry Reid Properties is the developer under that project and would be the property manager for that project. The second project is called the Royal. It's in partnership with Anthony Properties. Perry Reid Construction would be the construction company for that project, with a design being provided by Studio 951, which is an architectural firm based in Lincoln, Nebraska. Now, I want to emphasize one thing on that. We have two projects primarily because of the differential between the two projects. The Magnolia Commons project is what we consider to be more of a workforce housing project designed for a different rent structure than the Royal project, and it will have different ownership and it will have different financing than the Royal project. The Royal project is more of a typical market rate project that would have, again, different ownership and different financing from the first project being tentatively called Magnolia Commons. That may change. So jumping into Magnolia Commons, and I want to introduce really Perry Reid Properties and then have Dave Wells talk to you about Key Construction. Perry Reid Properties is a property management company, as I indicated, based in Lincoln, Nebraska. Formed in probably 1982 is my recollection. I've been representing Perry Reid Properties for 30 years, but now I serve as general counsel as an in-house attorney for them. We manage approximately 7,300 dwelling units in an 8-state area, comprised about 80 different projects, and that's what we do. We have about 200 employees consisting of property managers and maintenance people. In fact, with us today is Rachel Grady, who's our area manager for the Kansas area. She has about 12 different projects under her area management and control. We have a significant presence in property management in the Wichita area. So I asked Dave to talk about Key Construction just momentarily.
Thank you. We started Key back in 1978. So yes, I was just a young kid, way different than I am now. But we've worked across the country. We have done. I should have added it up, but I'm going to say 2,000 or 3,000 multifamily units, mostly in the Midwest. We've got an office in Tulsa, which we built down there, a lot of HUD work down there, a lot of stuff in Wichita, a lot of stuff with Perry Reid in Wichita. We have an office in Fort Worth. We built a lot of residential down there also. We've done Bozeman, Montana, Oklahoma City, all over the place. So we've done everything from market rate garden style walk up to affordable, different kinds of funding. We've done high-rise historic, which are really fun. I love that. We're doing a project actually with Perry Reid right now in Andover, Kansas, which is 220 structured parking stalls, 300 parking stalls at grade, and then 186 units on top and 40,000 foot of commercial space underneath. So we feel like we've got a lot of experience in exactly this kind of project, and we appreciate the opportunity.
Could you hit the next slide, please? Mayor, Commissioners, thanks for the opportunity. My name's David Galicchio. I'm the General Counsel for Anthony Properties. Anthony Properties has been in business for over 40 years, developing all types of commercial real estate properties all over the country. Over the past decade, we've shifted our focus to multifamily development, and my colleague Brian Hsu, who is unfortunately unable to make it today due to a scheduling conflict, has led each of our dozen multifamily projects over the past 5 or 6 years. We've delivered on 5, and we have 7 in varying stages of development across the country, centered mainly in the Midwest. And on each of our dozen properties that we've developed, we've partnered with Perry Reid to provide all of the equity financing and for Perry Reid to manage those projects. Our strategy is develop and hold. We haven't sold any of our multifamily projects, and we don't intend to. We're in it for the long haul, and I thank you for the opportunity to talk to you guys today.
Tom spoke about Alex Perry with Perry Reid Properties and Perry Reid Construction. Tom has been touching on Perry Reid Properties. Perry Reid Construction does not have the lengthy history that Key Construction does, but we do have a ton of experience in multifamily. Over the last 5 years, we've built around 2,500 units of apartments in various communities, working with the development team, working with the management team. Very accustomed to hitting deadlines. Apartments are in high demand these days. As soon as we finish a building, we usually have it leased out, which is good, but it creates some time constraints on the construction company. And so making sure we're efficient and able to meet deadlines is very important, and very confident that here in Salina we'd be able to do the same thing, and excited to have the opportunity to do it. So.
Talk about your property.
Yeah, there we go. Well, I also have a entity other than Key, just an investment entity, DRKLC, and I tied up actually I have a contract on the 28 acres just to the south of Menards. It's contingent on the due diligence period is over. It's contingent on getting this award, and then I close 10 days after that. So per our schedule, you'll see that we close on that property if we're fortunate enough to get awarded the RFP on the 25th of May.
And the Royal site is one that you guys should be familiar with. It's been subject of each of the prior 2 proposals. Anthony Properties also has an option to purchase this 40-acre tract, and as Dave mentioned, it's contingent on being awarded under the RFP. In the event that something comes up with this site, we also have a backup site on Waterwell that we have a letter of intent on. So this is our primary site. We intend, if awarded, to build on that, but we also have a backup just in case.
So one of the things that we wanted to talk to you about is kind of the schedule that we're contemplating. And The Magnolia Commons, one of the things I should mention out of the gate, though, is that Reid Properties has current investment in the city of Salina. About 10 years ago, we didn't develop, but we acquired the Ridge of Salina. It's 296 units down just north off Magnolia. And then also Prairie Glen, also down south of Magnolia, 848-unit townhome project. So we have existing infrastructure, meaning people that manage properties for us, and so we're familiar with the market. That was important for us to consider when we were talking about construction and building turnover and absorption of dwelling units based upon the market studies that we've seen. And it's important for a developer to take into consideration the building turnover and the absorption, so that the last thing anybody wants is empty buildings. We want occupied buildings. And consequently, in our schedule that you will see here, what we contemplate is that, and we'll talk about some of the preliminary matters, but if selected, Magnolia Commons would be our first project out of the gate, and we would contemplate breaking ground in October of this year. 12 months from that date, we would have the first building coming online, and that's 36 dwelling units. Each building would contain 36 units. We would contemplate additional buildings come on about every 60 days thereafter. And that's about 18 dwelling units for absorption each month. And the market study supports 15 dwelling units being absorbed each month. So we're comfortable with that, but it's a measured process, and it's a measured calculation based upon the market and the population and the growth in Salina and how the buildings would be completed. It also helps from a lot of different perspectives that we'll talk about a little bit. One of the things that I do want to mention, you'll see that we have phase 1 and a phase 2 described there. What we would envision for both projects really is a decision-making point based upon the absorption of the dwelling units. It's 180 units in phase 1, it's 72 units in phase 2, which would total 252 units. But the decision to proceed with phase 2 would be based upon occupancy of phase 1. The last thing that we would want to do is, again, to build units that are not occupied, and we want to have the projects really being absorbed on the same schedule as the growth of the city is what we're contemplating. And from our perspective, it's much better if it leases up quickly and it's a strong lease-up period, so that we can have our contractor stay on site, mobilize once, and it's a much more efficient construction process for us. Yeah, I'm going to have David talk about the same thing in connection with the Royal.
Sure. So as Tom mentioned, we plan to stagger the construction starts. So the Royal site work, we contemplate starting in August of 2024, with the first building being delivered a year after that, and then a similar 60-day turnover for each subsequent building. And that's for the staggering is for two main reasons. As Tom already mentioned, it's for absorption purposes, but it's also a practical consideration to allow subcontractors to reasonably complete their work. We hope to use as many local subcontractors as possible for both projects, and staggering the starts will allow them to provide the high-quality workmanship that we all expect. We've identified 2 phases as well. The first phase consisting of 6 28-unit buildings for a total of 168 units in the first phase. The second phase includes 3 additional 28-unit buildings for a total of 252 units.
So I guess the development schedule that we would envision, and we had to make some assumptions to come up with this, but we were assuming that the city of Salina is going to take some time and do a measured calculation to select the developer. And there's some time period that we would have to undergo to develop or negotiate a development agreement. I've been before this body before. We looked at an alternate site, and I'm familiar with your zoning code and what we would have to do. We would have to annex the sites. Both sites, I believe, would have to be annexed. I think we'd have to change the zone of both sites. And I'm open to suggestion, but I see a couple different paths that would permit the use to be made of the property. Either depends upon really the density of the change of zone, or a conditional use permit that could accompany the property as a part of the commercial zone. We also want to make sure that we take the appropriate time to have the IRB resolution proceed at that same process so that we have one package working its way through the approval process of the city of Salina, so that hopefully comes out of the snake at the end as a completed package. But once the city would be in a position to approve a development agreement, with the next day we would authorize our architects to proceed with the design, and we would close on the land. We still have to do engineering on the site to make sure that we have an appropriate grading and drainage plan, and be working concurrently with finalized costs before we can negotiate the final construction loan that we would need with our construction lender. We would envision that all that could be completed approximately by the end of September, and that we could close with our construction loan and bring in our equity from our investors towards the first part of October for a groundbreaking the middle part of October.
And the schedule for the Royal is quite similar to what Tom just went over. The differences I would point out are we anticipate that our civil engineering process will take a little bit longer, and we're targeting to complete that by the end of 2023. And then each one of those subsequent milestones that Tom mentioned, we anticipate every 60 days or so trying to hit that August 1st, 2024 groundbreaking, so that we're staggering both projects appropriately.
So, as I mentioned, Carl Yeager from Yeager Architecture in Kansas City did come up with a preliminary site plan. Again, we have not done the engineering, we have not done a grading and drainage plan, but this site plan does show, you can see 5 buildings that would comprise Phase 1. Again, each building contains 36 dwelling units, and then the 2 additional darker shaded rectangular footprinted buildings would be the Phase 2. You'll see that the reference to a future commercial development. Reid Properties is not a commercial developer. We do not do that. I mean, that would be something that we would probably likely sell. If I get a vote on it, we would sell it, and we wouldn't be partaking in that. I always advise my client to stick with what you know, but it'd be my hope that we'd be able to market that to someone else. Okay. Let's see, where are we now? 12. Yeah. Do you want to talk about the facades? Yeah. You know materials better than I do.
Yeah, on the Magnolia Commons, we decided to go with the flat roof. Gives it a different look. I know Anthony Properties is doing the pitched roof, which it's more stately. Ours is more of an open walk-through concept. We'll have breezeways between each building. We'll have an entry for the units off of the breezeways, patios on every apartment, or balconies on every upper apartment, patios on the first floor. Let's see, what else did I want to mention there?
No garages?
Yeah, we'll have carports out front for half the units. We figured typically it seems like about half of the dwellers want to have a carport, and they'd probably range between $30 to $40 a month if they want to rent a carport. We built pretty much this exact project in Wichita. It's called the Flats, and the tenants love it because it's in your apartment. You can see both directions. You have a front window looking out onto the common area, and in this case you'd have the back window that look out on the park if we do the park. It makes the apartments feel really, really open. It's been a really successful project for us. The outside, just like you've heard before, one difference is we'll have masonry up, then we have that cast stone band across there, really sets it off. And then you've heard the hardy siding, which is actually a cementitious siding. It'll be either hardy board or allure. There's multiple different brands, but it'll be a cement siding. Vinyl windows, like I said, the flat roof, it'll be a TPO roof. Let's see, that's
I think the next slide
pretty
is just
much
the
it.
other side of it. Right?
Is it the,
Yeah, or another option.
yeah, different paint color, I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, I think the site plan for the Royal is on this next slide. So each of the yellow rectangles is a 28-unit building. Buildings 1 through 6 would be the first phase, and then we'd contemplate buildings 7 through 9 being a part of the second phase. One big difference to point out between the Royal and Magnolia Commons are the garages. So each 28-unit building has 8 attached garages. And then across from each one of the buildings in the purple rectangles, those are detached garages, each with 8 available detached garages in there. So for each 28-unit building, there's 16 available garages, and then ample surface parking as well. Also shown on the site plan are some of the amenities: dog park, pool, clubhouse, plenty of open space for pickleball courts, because that seems like the thing to do these days. And then one other thing to point out, along the Dry Creek border there is a linear park that we've contemplated as a scope alternative recreational trail, which lines up pretty closely to the city's comprehensive plan. And then along Magnolia Road, we've contemplated an additional city park playground area.
Here is the building elevation for the Royal. As David was saying, on the lower level, you have 8 garages that funnel into a common area hall. And then you've got the 2 end garages there. They actually go directly into the unit beside them, which is a nice feature of this building. You've got a lot of unit mixes and different units for people to pick from. But as far as the facade goes, you've got the stone going up and down in elevation, which gives it a nice look. You've got the offsetting colors of Hardy, same Hardy that Dave Wells was talking about when it comes to the siding. You've got decks. You also have suspended decks that give a little bit more of a modern look to a traditional looking building. And then the little details like the timbers that come down on the fronts and the eyebrows above the windows with the corbels, those things make the building just really pop and look really nice for a long time. So, yeah, lots of stone on the building. Vinyl windows similar to the Magnolia, and that is the sum of the exterior for the Royal.
Go. Amenities. Amenities used to always be in real estate, it was location, location, location. In multifamily, it's amenities, amenities, amenities. If you don't have the amenities, you'll be less successful than your competition that does. So we have, you can read them, but I'll go ahead. We'll have a resort-style pool. We'll have state-of-the-art fitness. We'll have a secured package delivery, which is really a neat deal. You can see one down on the bottom left. UPS or FedEx or whoever brings a package to you when you're at work, and they can put it in there and then text you, and then you can come in when you get off work 24 hours a day and get your package. Especially with all the porch pirates and stuff now stealing stuff that people lay outside, you never have to worry about it. We'll have a bike maintenance shop, we'll have a dog park, we'll have Wi-Fi, full-size washer and dryer. We use full size and we stack them as opposed to the combo units that just don't seem to work as well. So the tenants love them. All stainless steel appliances, walk-in closets, like I mentioned before, patios on the first floor, balconies on everything above, and the ability to rent carports. On our interiors, I don't know if we're ready for that yet, but we'll have the granite tops, granite or quartz tops. We'll have LVT, luxury vinyl tile. We'll have wood cabinets, wood doors. We like to try to build for the fair housing standards too. So all of our doors, all our interior doors will be 36-inch doors. So not all of them will be ADA units, but they'll all be wide doors and stuff, so we could convert them if we needed to.
And on the Royal, the amenities would basically be the same. On the Royal, the amenities would be very similar. I think it's important to remember with this amount of units in one location, having 2 clubhouses is important so that everybody has ample access to the amenities. And so we made sure that both projects had their own clubhouse. But everything Dave just said would also be present at the Royal.
So realizing we have a minute and a half left on our clock, I'm going to skip
You
forward
know,
a couple.
I guess you have 2 projects, so you get an hour, right? Is that how?
Well,
Just kidding. So
we don't want to take that
we're-
much of your time.
We seem to be having plenty of time, and so
Okay.
I think if you don't go through this correctly, it's going to make us have
Okay.
more questions.
Well,
So
I would
don't-
like Dave to just mention,
Yeah.
he mentioned the similar project in the Flats, and just talk about a little bit about that project and when it was built. And
Oh, boy.
I'm not gonna-
Rochelle would probably know better than me. She manages it, but it was a historic Wichita high school. I told you I love the historic stuff, so we converted the old high school in Wichita to 67 apartments, and then it was so popular, we built this on the land next to it. So it's the Flats. It's, like I say, it's going to be very similar to what we're doing at Magnolia Commons. Same finishes, same amenities, and again, it's been very, very popular.
Where's that at in Wichita?
It's on 2nd and Emporia.
Yeah, it's right there on Second and Emporia. It's on the back side of the historic building.
Have you been to any concerts at the Wave? It's right across the street from the Wave, the
Yeah,
outdoor
I've seen 'em.
music venue.
downtown.
I can speak to the Mansions of Granite Falls and Papillion. We are just finishing this project in the next 3 or 4 months. It's the building type and design is pretty much exactly like we're proposing for the Royal. Again, you've got pictures of the pool and the way the buildings look actually finished versus just a flat front elevation. It's a great looking project, and I think if anybody wants any more information on any previous projects that we've done or pictures, that we can always provide those too.
So that's the fun and sexy stuff. Now we're going to talk about the budget a little bit. The pretty pictures is where the lawyer steps out and steps back in when we're talking about the budget, evidently. So what we have there here on our slide envisions, this is the sources and uses that, as I call it, the pro forma or projected sources and uses for the Magnolia Commons. It contemplates, this contemplates 180 units. This does not contemplate the entire 252 units. Using the same pricing scheme, I would add another $15 million. So it would be a $52 million investment for the full 252 dwelling units. Point out a couple highlights. This is 5 buildings of 36 units each for the 180 dwelling units. It's approximately $176,000 per dwelling unit for hard costs. That does not include the soft costs. And the $176,000 is kind of what we're seeing in development in the Midwest generally. It sounds like a lot of money. There's a lot of construction costs have escalated a lot that we've seen over the last, for example, the project that Alex just mentioned, that was at about $125,000 to $130,000 per unit, and that was commenced in 2020. So 3 years later, costs have escalated that much for development of multifamily properties. The all-in development cost here, you'll see down at the bottom, approximately $37,500,000. That's approximately $208,000 per dwelling unit. What we had envisioned, and a couple things I wanted to mention about the subsidy that we envisioned, and it's pretty far-sighted and forward-thinking for the city to come up with this methodology. I've never seen it in my years of experience. But one of the things that I've seen similar cities do with similar approaches is there's a couple concerns. From a developer perspective, the subsidy is going to be income. And one of the things I would like to be able to do and propose to the city is that we structure it as a debt. And so it's not automatic income from day one, but it helps the city in a couple regards. I think, number one, as mentioned, we're long-term hold developers. We're not going to sell this project once it's constructed. We're going to stay here for the long time. We've owned the properties here for multiple years, and it's pretty rare that we ever sell a property. We've sold a couple in my tenure because they're out of our footprint. Well, Kansas is not out of our footprint. We sold a project in Illinois, and we sold a project in Mississippi, to my knowledge. It's the only time we've done it in my experience. But if we structure it as debt, the city can ensure that the subsidy stays intact at the project. And I think that's important for the city. So that's one of the things that we would propose in connection with the subsidy proposed. The other thing I wanted to mention that's on the next slide, if you can, the rent structure. Now, I tried to differentiate the Magnolia Commons from the Royal, and it is one of the primary differences. You could see some difference in the design. You could see some difference in the construction. It's also intended to be a different price point from a rental structure. What we've tried to do here is create rents that are affordable to individuals and families earning no more than 80% of area median income of the city of Salina. And that's a HUD calculated measurement of area median income. And HUD does that annually for a lot of different purposes, but it's important in the housing world. And our rents are affordable to individuals and families making no more than 80% of area median income. Now, we don't intend to restrict eligibility. It's not a tenant eligibility issue. Tenant can make the choice. And I think that was important from your market rate RFP, is that you don't want to restrict tenant eligibility. But I think trying to differentiate Magnolia Commons from the Royal, we thought it was important to give a different price point in the market so that tenants would have several options on what they wanted to pay for. And that's why we've correspondingly structured the rents as we have for the Magnolia Commons. And I'm going to have David talk about the Royal structure a little bit.
So you'll see our building type has a little bit more variability in types of units available, and you'll see our rents are just a little bit higher than the rents for the Magnolia Commons. We based our rents for the Royal on a market study that we commissioned back in 2021 for Salina, and just adjusted those upwards a little bit for inflation.
You want to talk about your budget just briefly?
Oh, sure. So here's our overall development budget. You'll see our hard costs per unit a little bit higher at $195,000, and then total costs fully loaded at about $222,000 per unit.
All right, we're getting towards the end, and then we'll quit boring you with our presentation. You can ask some questions for us. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about our equity sources. And for Magnolia Commons, Prairie Reid Properties has been involved in the development world for the last 20 years, and over that time period, we've attracted a small but core group of investors that invest their equity dollars with us and their capital with us for construction of multifamily properties. And it's a list that's probably around 20 people that we've approached periodically, usually a couple times a year, to invest in multifamily properties. We've talked to them about this project. They're encouraged by this project. I am very confident that we will be able to raise the equity. Do I have them signed to agreements yet? No, but that's not the kind of arrangement we have with our investors. It's more of a handshake with our investors. And once we get final pricing and size the construction loan, then we'll be in a position to finalize the equity investment from our investors. I'm 99.99% confident that we have our equity lined up as we speak today. And there are a lot of securities law requirements that we have to go to before I can say 100% convinced. But I'm with our track record with our investors, it's a done deal in my mind.
And then really quickly for the Royal, we contemplate funding the equity as we've done every one of our investments with Perry Reid. So it's just a joint venture between Anthony Properties and Perry Reid, and there's no outside money. So that is 100% ready to go. As soon as we know what the number is, it's done. And then just to touch on the debt side for both projects, it's similar. We've had lenders that we've done business with in the past already issue letters of interest. We have them waiting in the wings, and as soon as we get a bid set ready to go and get our construction costs nailed down, we'll be ready to finalize our debt financing.
Kind of goes without saying, these projects will be a lot easier if interest rates are not at 9 or 10% when we try to break ground. So, but interest rates, obviously, all of our projections are based upon a certain set of assumptions with interest rates, and it's out of all our control on that issue. But One of the things that we try to do is stress test all of our properties using an 8.5% to 9% interest rate if rates go that high. And there's some hard decisions to be made if rates go that high, but we're certainly in a position to try to proceed on that basis. One of the questions I know is really how we structure our development fee. We're not a fee-based developer. Our development fee as contained in our pro forma sources and uses is a 4% based upon hard construction costs. Our typical structure is that it's paid concurrently with the progress payments, with a large portion, say 20% of the developer fees held back for construction completion and stabilization of rents. And usually our lenders insist upon that kind of structure for the payment of the development fee. But we intend, that's not why we do this. We develop properties for the long-term benefit of our investors and for the long-term hold for the company.
And just for the Royal, quickly, we based ours in the pro forma on 3.5% of total costs. We're obviously open to basing that percentage on hard costs or any other base that we want to do. As Tom mentioned, that's not why we're in business. It's really just to cover overhead while we're developing the project. So directionally, the amount of the fee is accurate and where we would probably end up.
So on our last slide, really talking about some of the scope alternatives that you included in your RFP, the one thing that I can speak to is really the affordability of the rent. I'd mentioned the Magnolia Commons would be geared, or the rent structure would be geared as affordable to individuals and families making no more than 80% of area median income. I would welcome the opportunity to put that in a binding restriction on the property for a period of 10 years. I think that's important for accountability of the City Commission to the public to be able to make that kind of representation, and I think we can do that. And typically how I have done it in other communities is a preparation of a declaration of covenants and restrictions, that we're not going to restrict tenant eligibility, but we will restrict our rents based upon studio size, or the size of the unit, and based upon the area median income of the city of Salina. And I think that will help ensure to the city that we mean what we say when these are going to be affordable rents for at least a period of 10 years.
And then on the next slide, some of the scope alternatives for the Royal. As I mentioned, we're focusing mainly on the additional amenities that we might be able to develop. One being the recreational trail or linear park along Dry Creek, which is already contemplated in the city's comprehensive plan. And then also dedicating land along Magnolia Road for a city park. And we think that both of those would be great amenities for all residents of the city and would help promote the health and well-being of all of the Salina residents. One other thing that we haven't touched on, our 40-acre site has about 10 acres of land that is not included in that site plan for future expansion or additional units in the future.
Yeah, can you go back one slide? Yeah. Everybody's told you, and I know it's super important to you, as much local participation as you can get. What we do is, and it's been very effective, we will, once we get through design development, we're into construction drawings, we'll actually hold a job fair, probably on the site, probably rent a couple rooms in the hotel right there, and encourage all the local subs and suppliers to come in. It helps when they put a face with a name. Probably won't be me, it'll be my pre-construction guys, but they'll come here, they'll meet all the subs from all the various trades, all the suppliers. It does a lot of things. It lets us see them and check them out. It lets them know we're a real deal and this is really going to happen. And it also builds enthusiasm for the project. You know, it's one thing to get a invitation to bid in the mail, but when you sit face to face with somebody and say, here's our project, we're super proud of it, we can't wait to do it, you get a lot more participation that way. It's been very effective for us. So.
That's all we have. We thank you for the opportunity to be able to come and speak with you. I do have to correct one thing. I mispronounced Rochelle's name, and if I don't correct that before we leave, I want it on the record that I did pronounce it correctly. So.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
Hopefully that's the worst mistake you make today. That probably is the worst mistake you'll make all day.
Could be.
Okay, I'm sure we have some questions. Can I ask, I usually go to the commissioners first, but you mentioned something about the annexation of the zoning, obviously we have to do. Did you also mention you were going to apply for IRBs? Will that be on both projects?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, IRB on both projects. We think the benefit of both the tax exemption on sales, but also the real estate tax exemption is a key to make this really function well the first 10 years.
And you're asked for the sales tax exemption also?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to verify that on both, so. Okay. Who wants to start?
Thanks for the presentation. How much of a slowdown or delay could you take between Phase 1 and Phase 2 and still meet the December 31st, 26 deadline for the state funds?
We showed 2 months after, when we turn over the last building, we showed 2 months, and then the following year, I think almost to the month, we'd start Phase 2.
Yeah, I think it envisioned probably at the 8th month of construction, the second projects would start. When Magnolia Commons is at approximately the 8-month mark, the Royal would start. So its first building would come available 2 months after the completion of Magnolia Commons, because we wanted one building every 60 days is our plan. Now, you know, plans are great. It doesn't always work out that way, but that is our plan for absorption. It is important for absorption for a lot of different reasons. So
if absorption was going more slowly than you wanted, there'd be a realistic risk that some of that state funding would not be used, because that's reimbursed funding, or, yeah.
yeah, and our schedule contemplates that we would incur significant costs in the Phase 2 projects early enough in the process to be able to fully account for all of the state funding dollars. That was part of the thing that we tried to work into our schedule.
Okay.
We recognize that the city has a deadline with the state of Kansas on the utilization of those funds. So,
All right, thank you.
And looking at the budget, I realize on Magnolia Commons, you spoke about this budget for 180 units. And on the Royal, is that for the 180 or is that for 252?
It's for 252.
That's what okay. It was significantly higher, so I thought it probably was. So, okay.
Sticker shock.
You know, when it comes to the phasing, we'll know after, or have a pretty good idea after the first 4 or 5 buildings at Magnolia and with the Royal project starting of how we expect leasing to go. It's a thing, but the way we timed it out, we would be able to use the funds that you guys need and want to use by the end of 26 by that time.
Now, if it's going slower than you think, if you used up those funds, do you stop construction for a while? I mean, what happens to the building?
well, I think that is a risk. That is a risk that we, you know, based upon our schedule, we contemplated a Phase 1 and a Phase 2 and a triggering of Phase 2. And I think the triggering, at least right now, what we've talked about is achievement of a certain percentage. And we're thinking achievement of a 90% occupancy for the buildings completed to date. If all the buildings are 90% occupied at that time, at the decision point, then we would proceed right into Phase 2 because our contractor would still be on site. But there is a risk there. What if we get to that point in the decision tree and we're not occupied? Maybe the job growth in Salina is slower than expected. Who knows? Maybe interest rates are at 15%. Who knows? We wanted to have the ability to not proceed with Phase 2 until we achieve that trigger point. But that does put the city at risk that some dollars may not be expended. We've sized our subsidy to each phase, though. We're not asking for all the subsidy up front, but it'd be sized to each phase. So we wouldn't be expecting subsidy for units that we have not built.
But to be clear, Commissioner, we wouldn't stop construction on anything that we've started. Like Tom said, we just may not start the last 2 buildings.
That's right.
When we plan, but we start, we're finishing, and we're going to finish as fast as we can too, because in my world, time is money. So.
There, there is, we understand your question, and we get that there's that time frame there and that the number of units. If we don't take the absorption as it comes and as we expect it to, one, I think we're pretty experienced. I think our excellent group behind me. Everybody's got a ton of experience. Where what I don't think anybody wants to see is projects where it slows down, where you've got projects that are framed, that have Tyvek on them, that you've got foundations in, and it just stops. That's a whole other issue then too. And so it's a balancing of those two that's important.
I haven't done the math, but if there's second phase is 72 units on Magnolia Commons and second phase on the Royals, another 84 units, is that 156 units? So our first phase on both projects would combine approximately 340, 350 units. Second phase would fill in the gap to rise it up to the 500. So I guess our proposal, if things go wrong, things go badly, we would still bring 340 units to the city. If my math's right.
I think it's
approximately.
directionally.
So I guess that's where the gap, because I know I'm looking at the grant funding, and on one of them you had 12.6 and the other was 9,
Yeah.
which doesn't equal the total we have.
Yeah.
So that additional would go actually to the Royal. No, the Royal's already.
Yeah,
Your
and-
budget's on the
Go to
252, so it'd go to
the additional
Magnolia
72
Commons.
units.
If we added 72 units as a second phase for Magnolia Commons, that would be another $3.5 million
That would
in
fill
subsidy
that.
for
Okay,
set
that would
phase
get
two.
us to our total dollar.
Right.
Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear about the not stopping construction. I was in the savings loan business in the 80s, and I remember going out of Dallas towards Louisiana, and you had a fully completed down to a basement over about a 1.5 mile area. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a good one.
Yeah, not good.
Doesn't do anybody any good.
So, okay. Other questions down here?
Magnolia Commons. That's kind of I knew that parcel had been in play. Are utilities extended down there? Has anyone looked into that? Is it build ready?
I do not believe so. I mean, Magnolia Commons, we contemplate that we would have to extend Virginia Drive for the full span of the project, and we have a quote in our budget for the extension of Virginia Drive, but we're contemplating that would be the street and water and sewer lines and electricity down to that site.
Okay, and there's been a lot of discussion with city code with developments of having only one way in and one way out. Has that been looked at?
The simple answer is no. We have not engaged Caw Valley Engineering fully for the contract, but obviously we would have to fully engineer the site in conjunction with the city's land use process. And if a secondary access point, I know that there is a road to the south, perhaps a connection down there would have to be made for fire and safety purposes, I understand.
Yeah, that's what I wondered, if it had been looked at connecting
Yeah.
to the south.
And obviously, in my estimation, I mean, our budget does include a dollar amount from the city's infrastructure funding source to help extend Virginia Drive. If we need to tap that to help us extend to a southern street, yeah, we certainly can do that as a part of the development process under the development agreement.
Okay. And would these two projects work in conjunction with each other? Would Key be the primary contractor on both of them?
Reid Construction would be the developer of the Royal, the contractor, the general contractor of the Royal. The common party is Reid Properties that would provide property management for both properties. So once we're up and operating, Reid Properties would be managing both. But for construction, Key would be building Magnolia Commons, and then Reid Construction would be building the Royal.
Okay. And the Magnolia Commons, you referenced the flats in Wichita. Is that design ready to go?
Well, the flats in Wichita is completed.
But you're going to implement that?
That same design, yes.
So
we're
that's-
doing another one that is very similar called the Dumont, which is right by the new ball stadium in Wichita. That's ongoing right now. They're just putting the sheathing on the roof. But yeah, we've got the plans developed. If
Plans
that, it might-
are in place.
Yes, yes.
Have to engineer this.
Yeah, we have to engineer it to this site.
Right. And then for the Royal, where are you at on those plans?
In this exact same position, it's a footprint that we've built with Perry Reid Construction, like 3 or 4 times already.
We built that same building probably 40 times.
Really?
Yeah, we know it inside and out, but the plans are done. And that's a good point, though, because a lot of times that architectural process can take 3, 6, up to 9 months. Really, all we have to do, we get to skip that over because we're using buildings we've already built before. We meet certain design criteria that the city may have and, go over that sort of stuff. But then the civil design team is designing the site, taking into consideration access and, fire and safety vehicles. But yeah, from the building standpoint, those plans are ready to go.
Okay, that's good. Because I know it does take time to put everything on paper. And your funding on both projects is in place, ready to go?
The short answer is yes, but the longer answer is we don't have a construction commitment yet, a construction loan commitment. We have to have final pricing for that. We have lenders that say, yes, we're in. We want to help you on this.
Okay.
So,
I think we included letters, didn't we?
yeah, we included letters of interest. As a cautious lawyer, until I have a loan commitment, I'm going to say the answer is no. So,
Cautious lawyer.
yes, that's right. That's why I advise my clients.
Okay. No more questions.
Well, first an observation, I think that extra time, it was more thorough, so I have fewer questions as a result, it seems like. I am kind of curious at the architectural decision between the flat roof and the pitched roof, and for what it's worth, I actually like the diversity in architecture because those are kind of in close proximity. But is that kind of a cost decision or insurance, like the TPO versus a pitched
It's
composite
actually more
roof?
expensive to do the flat roof. The TPO is more expensive than the comp shingles. The other thing we like about it is that it gives you a place to put your rooftop units. So that, that's a lot of units that are going to be somewhere. I'm not sure where you guys put them. Are they, huh?
On the ground.
On the ground, okay, so sorry. But
No fighting yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
we're still friends.
Nice landscape.
Right, which is what we're doing on the Dumont apartments I mentioned. They're on the ground, we're putting fence and landscaping around them, but it's just worked really well for us at the flats to do the flat roof. But it is a little more expensive.
Is it more resilient? Like, I'm guessing the insurance premiums are probably maybe a little cheaper if it's more resilient, subject to wind damage, et cetera?
I don't want to ask this lawyer, but this lawyer may know. I don't know, I don't know what the
Usually
difference
they
would be in the,
Usually they're rated, hurricane strength, TPO rating, and you do get some benefit, but, it's just a total cost of the building calculation usually.
The EPO would probably, like if you're in a hail, or I think it's rated a little higher, but again, I'm not for sure there.
yeah. Probably not a significant difference in the insurance.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry if I dug too deep. I get a
Not
little.
at all.
Yeah, I've had them get along for 6 months now. So.
One thing I would like to bring up, if I can add to that, is,
Please.
and I'm not sure who brought up the soundproofing, but I talk about amenities being important. Soundproofing is super important too. What we do is we do a double stud, we intertwine the insulation in it, we do the LVT, but we put a sound mat under the LVT. And we put acoustic caulk at the top and bottom of every wall. And we'll never put, and this is what typically people do wrong, is in the stud cavity from this apartment to this apartment, they put a receptacle on both sides. Well, there's zero sound stop there. So we try to achieve higher than an STC rating of 55. So, and you have to do all that stuff to do it. So never put the receptacles, whether it be cable or electric or anything, in the same stud cavity. Intertwine the insulation, acoustic top and bottom. And probably the most important thing is when you go into LVT is acoustic mat. So it's different when you have carpet, but with LVT is luxury vinyl tile. There's a bunch of different names for it, but it when you walk around in there, especially women, it seems like in high-heeled shoes you hear that, but you don't when you put the acoustic mat down. So
Good to know. We talking 2x4 or 2x6 construction?
2x4 between the apartments.
Yeah.
The exterior, yeah.
Okay.
Like I say, though, double studs.
Got it. Just curious.
On the, any other?
Oh, no, I'm done.
On the Royal, the garages, they're 16 for 28 apartments, so we have rent rates here, so I'm going to take it that there's an additional cost for the garage rentals.
That's correct.
And they said on the, I believe it was on the Magnolia Commons, it was $30 to $40 for carports a month. What does the garage run a month approximately?
We'll obviously have to do a little bit more market study to nail it down, but it's usually in the $75 to $150 range. I would guess about $100 if you wanted it.
Generally, right now, the attached garages are $125 a month, and
That's true, you have attached and detached.
yes,
Yeah.
the attached ones go right into the building. Another distinction to make between the two projects, not a huge thing, is that the Magnolia Commons is the open breezeways, and these have the closed, kind of more secure breezeways. And again, you start doing different things, and it costs more, which means rent has to go up. But yes, it's definitely something that. What did you say? What was your question again?
The garage cost.
Yeah, the detached garages, which are just outside of the 28-unit building at Magnolia, or I'm sorry, the Royal, those are generally $75 a month.
Okay, thank you.
You know, the other thing I was going to add, it would have been much easier to present one project rather than two projects, but we did so with the intention of differentiating housing types and housing choices. Right. And we built a lot of different types of housing around the country, but I think it was important for the city to consider different housing options, and that's why we presented two as a combined complementary package.
And so, with that being said, that leads me to my next question. Can you talk a little bit about the differences in the product, because there is a difference in the rents, when you look at it per square foot? What's the upscaled, I guess I would say, that creates the higher rent on the Royal versus the Magnolia Commons? And whoever's doing this is going to say it's better workmanship, I know, so who wants to go first?
I mean, there's a lot of things that add to the cost. I mean, a good one, going back to the open breezeways, that saves cost on Magnolia. There's cost added to the Royal that gives you that. Those attached garages, those take up a lot of space that could otherwise be more highly rented. And so then you've got to adjust the rents. So you've got those amenity of attached garages. I've lost the ability now to lease that space as an apartment. A first floor apartment generally is pretty highly desired. But when we add those garages, it's just been a product that it kind of blends a townhome and an apartment style. It gets you better density, but not too much density. And so that's really where you'll see the price changes is those. On the interiors, they're going to have a lot of the same finishes. The exteriors will have different stone amounts and things like that change them. And then really when you get down to the per unit pricing, we have the square footages, but then even a third floor versus a first floor with an attached garage, that one actually rents out. I think it's the highest per square foot because it has the direct access garage. So there's a lot of factors that create those variables. But generally, like Tom said, hitting a lot of that ends up being good for everybody.
Could you talk a little bit about, and maybe you touched on this, finished product as far as cabinets, countertops, bath showers, what kind of material you use in those?
Hard surface countertops, granite or quartz.
So you do use granite or quartz, not?
Yeah,
okay.
and with us being long-term, owner-operators, we want to see materials that go in there are going to stand the test of time. It doesn't make any sense for us to put in junk so that we can replace junk with more junk over and over again.
And cabinets?
Cabinets, I mean, well, from a manufacturer, we use a lot. We've used over and over again, good cabinets. Again, they're not cabinets you put in a custom house. Again, we have to keep
Right.
price point to a certain level. But again, very nice finishes, nice appliances, washer and dryers in each unit, balconies or patios on each unit. There's a lot of apartments built these days that even skip out on putting decks and balconies on them because they do cost more money, but they're just another nice amenity, I guess, to the apartment. So security too is another big thing. Dad's cost is the hardware for doors and things like that, and that's another thing that's constantly changing is the levels of security. It's a big deal to anyone living in an apartment or anyone, and so that's something else that can change very drastically.
And I think I noticed on the pictures, the Royal and the Magnolia Commons both have, now, the location where packages can be dropped off, is that their mail pickup for everyone also, or is that just for package pickups?
It'll be both. There'll be mailboxes for postal mail, and then there'll be the package center for UPS and all the other.
And that's in both?
Yeah.
Both, okay. I thought it
I mean, there's an incredible amount of packages that get delivered to these sites every day.
And I hear the managers hate it when they take them to the office and say, give this to that apartment. They end up with a mountain of packages, so, yeah, oh yeah. It really works. It's really a good system. We've done them before where we actually had refrigerated boxes, but we haven't done that lately because nobody was ever using them. I think they thought there was going to be a big push for perishables delivered, and it hadn't seemed to be.
And you do have options on both pieces of ground. You said that, right?
Yes.
I just didn't see it in my notes.
Really under contract. They're not-
Under contract, okay. Okay.
Just a point of clarity, did you say the washer and dryer were included
Yes.
with the unit? It's a nice amenity.
And that's that's included in the rent?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
That is.
All stainless steel. Not the washer and dryer,
Yes.
all the appliances.
Kitchen appliances are stainless steel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You can get them, you just don't want to.
Yeah, that's right. Better price.
A couple questions. Sites of this size, how many staff people would be typically needed to operate and maintain that?
On the construction end?
No,
Or you're talking
no,
about
once we're up and
property
occupied.
management?
Yeah, I would say typically
Can
you
you,
have.
you want to, I know you don't want to, but
Right, I know, but I will.
Limit it to 15 minutes.
No, typically you
You
would
wanna
have
give
your
us your name the correct
My
way,
name is
too?
Rochelle
Yeah.
Brady. I'm with Perry Reid
Rochelle.
Properties. Hello, guys, and it is Rochelle. Typically, in an office of 100 and, what are we starting off with,
180.
180 units, you would most typically have a manager, an assistant, and maybe a part-time leasing. It just depends. I mean, obviously, at the get-go, you're going to be really busy. So it kind of, and as it gets bigger, if they close on another phase, you'll definitely have 3 people in the office, so.
Maintenance, right?
Well, maintenance probably.
What I was thinking about.
Are you
People
thinking
that
about
keep
maintenance
everything
staff?
running.
Yeah.
Yeah, the maintenance staff, I mean, Tom and I on the way down here, we're talking about how important maintenance is these days. It's
Absolutely.
with,
How many?
probably 2 per every, probably 1 per every 100 units.
Yeah. Yeah.
About
So
that.
I would say you'd have either 2 to 2 and a porter, or to 3 on these sites.
and could
So-
you give the name again of the 2 properties you currently are managing here in Salina?
It's the Ridge of Salina, and then the Reserves of Prairie Glen.
I always forget the reserves. I call it
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
reserves.
well, most people do.
Is that on South Ohio?
Yeah.
So formerly Chapel Ridge on the north side of Magnolia, and then Reserves of Prairie Glen are in the southeast corner of Ohio in Magnolia.
Oh, well, that leads to my other question, this green space, you talked about park kind of atmosphere. Is that something the complex would maintain or the city?
You guys go.
Thank you.
She's out.
For the Royal, that park that we contemplate along Magnolia Road, we would anticipate dedicating that to the city. As a part of the site plan of the development, there's quite a lot of open and green space, and all that would be on the complex to maintain.
Okay, I'm going to look at staff to see if they have any questions or.
One clarification, the commitment to the rent relative to the area median wage, is that both properties or just Magnolia
That's
Commons?
Magnolia Commons.
Okay. I think you covered some of the things that I've been focusing on, but your level of confidence based on replicating your product that you recently built, how confident are you in your budget numbers?
Well, we have, I was counting, I bet we have 8 projects under construction right now. So we're pretty attuned to the market and what things are costing right now. These costs that are in our budgets now are 2023 numbers. So I think we have a high degree of confidence.
Okay, and then you touched on some of your strategies to recruit subs and vendors, but that's a challenge in general and in Salina. What's your sense of ability to secure the subs that you're going to need for these projects?
I don't think there'll be any problem whatsoever. Somebody else mentioned it, and then that's the same thing we do. Is it works out great because it's not one big complex that we're trying to build where you would have to use one sub of every trade. We've done it before. We did it on the flats that we talked about. And it's fun because it gets some competition going. We had 2 drywallers and 2 painters, and we paired them against each other. And
Ready, set, go?
we did, yeah. But it could be the same thing here. If we find the 2 subs that can't handle the whole, or a sub that can't handle the whole thing, we'll pair it with 2 and we'll split it up.
Okay. Matt?
Yeah, I just wanted to get back to the phasing and be sure I understand. I think what both Magnolia Commons and the Royal said is you would start phase 2 when you reach 90% lease up on phase 1. Is that correct?
That's our proposal.
Yeah, and so I noticed that, again, I'll just use Magnolia Commons as a example. On your papers here, it shows the last building in phase 1 is turned over basically the middle of June of 25, and so it would take some time for that last building to reach 95, to reach the 90%. But you would be at that point you would be looking at the sum of buildings 1 through 5 being in total 90%.
Yes.
And what is, again, just to clarify, for buildings 1 through 5, what is your expectation of the timing that would take to reach 90%? Do you know that?
One of the benefits.
I guess to put it another way, what is your expectation of the absorption per month for Magnolia Commons?
15 units per month.
15 units, okay. And is that the same for the Royal?
Yeah, that's what our market study has indicated.
Right. So the other way to increase absorption is through aggressive marketing or concessions or something like that. Is that a part of either of these plans?
We've used a lot of different tools to make sure that we get properties leased up on a timely basis. Those tools are best used when the market requires. So I'm not going to give you a yes or no answer right now, but we're certainly familiar with incentives and rent concessions to lease buildings up. And
Right.
we have used them frequently. It's not our contemplation to use them right now because of the demand for housing in the city of Salina.
Okay.
And we're highly motivated to get them filled because they don't do us any good when we're paying debt
Right.
to have them vacant.
Yeah.
Right. And the 90% calculation, that's independent for the 2 different projects, correct? So if Magnolia Commons hits 90 and therefore goes to the phase 2, but for some reason the Royal is stuck at 80, then you would still proceed with your project and the other one would wait.
certain. I believe that to be true. I think there will be two separate projects with one property manager, but different staffs. And the Magnolia Commons, if it hits the marks, it would proceed to phase 2, even if, and we have different price points, and that's a possibility. It's not one that we would want to happen, but it is a possibility.
Okay, thank you.
Any other staff?
One quick question. The amenities, is the intention to build those irrespective of Phase 1 and Phase 2? And are they going to be built concurrently with Phase 1 if they're going to be built irrespective?
You're talking about the on-site amenities?
Yeah, the dog park and the various
Yeah.
other amenities. So.
We would, our goal, and we showed it in here, we would turn that over. We'd turn over the clubhouse, the pool, the dog park, and all of that before the first building. They can use it for pre-leasing. Best thing to do is bring somebody in and show them all the amenities. That's how you
lease.
That's how you lease the apartments, yeah. So, yes.
Clubhouse out of the gate.
Yeah.
And the intention would be for the dog park and everything else for that to be maintained by you?
Oh, for sure,
Yes.
yes, yeah. All the on-site is maintained by Perry.
Rochelle could probably answer this better than I, but we have found that multifamily communities need to be very pet friendly, and so we've embraced that, and that's why we've tried to have a lot of amenities for the pet owners. We have, I mean, a lot of our facilities are including a pet washing station, perhaps, and so you need to welcome the pets.
It sounds like pets sell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they do.
Okay, any other questions? I'm sure I'll think of something once you leave the room, but
I just have one. In my mind, then, that there's still a chance that if Phase 2 is delayed, in worst case scenario, Phase 2 just wouldn't get built. So then we'd be looking at state money being, I hate to use the word wasted, but or turned back in is probably better.
If that scenario plays itself out, just as soon as we see that developing, we're back in conversations with the state about time extension, alternate use, structuring the deal in a way that those funds are spent and the completion timeline could extend out further. Worst case scenario is proportionally having to return some of that.
Okay.
Our thought on that is exactly that. We want to plan for that possibility in the development agreement, and I would like to have a procedure in place under the development agreement to be able to address that common approach that may occur. We don't want it to occur, but we need to have a plan for it.
Okay, thank you.
Just out of curiosity, did any of you look at or consider the West Crawford property?
The only other one we looked at was the old hospital. Where was that? What street?
9th Street.
9th. Yeah.
Which location did you say?
West Crawford.
Yeah,
The old Ambassador Hotel.
we did not look at that. We looked at the ground on the north side of Magnolia, adjacent to the mall. That's close to the ridge of Salina, because there's some vacant ground there, and we were not able to strike a deal on that ground. Is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I thought that what
It's
you're
an ideal
talking
site.
about would be a good area.
okay. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you for your time today.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thanks, staff, for all your
We're just getting started.
Okay, we will be adjourned until 4 o'clock. Okay, it is 4 o'clock, and we're going to resume our special meeting. We have a fourth applicant, and I'm going to turn to city staff and let you introduce them.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. It occurred to me, and no one has asked me, but it seemed maybe worth noting that the order of the applicants was selected totally at a blind, random draw. So don't read anything to that. This is our fourth presentation and final presentation today. It's Flaherty and Collins, and I'll turn it over to David Flaherty, whose name is on the masthead, and let him make additional introductions and tell you about their project.
What's that?
Didn't have to get up before dark to drive.
It was very light. We came in from Indianapolis actually today, and then David is in our Kansas City office, so he drove over and we flew. But thank you everyone for having us here today, and we're very excited. We were here a little over a year ago, and very interested then, and our interest has not waned at all. We're still very interested. So I'm going to let our staff, they're all Flaherty and Collins people, introduce themselves, and then I'll come back and give you a little bit more on the company, and then we'll dive into the specifics of what we'd like to do here. So, David, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yep, my name is David Wingerson. As David Flaherty just said, I am from Kansas City, so I work out of our Kansas City office, so you'll probably see a lot of me if we are selected here. With that being said, I've been with the company for a while now, probably 5 or 6 years. I used to work on the construction side, I've worked on the management side, and now I'm on the development side. So looking forward to potentially working with you guys in the future, and are excited about this opportunity.
Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Kronk. I'm also with Flaherty & Collins. Probably don't have to say that. Everybody here is Flaherty & Collins. But I started with Dave. Actually, my previous life, I was in retail development. Joined Dave in 2008. I've been in mostly multifamily mixed-use deals since then. I'm one of 6 partners in the company. Is that correct? Yeah. So, and also I've been working on most of our companies work in Missouri and Kansas to this date. So I'm from Indianapolis as well, and we're looking forward to working with you guys, hopefully. So.
I'm Keith Cole. I oversee architecture and engineering teams at Flaherty & Collins. We have a group of in-house architects and engineers. We hire third-party consultants to help us through different properties and different project types selected based upon what's appropriate. My history with Flaherty & Collins is 19 years. With all of that being through multifamily development, came in-house as of recent, but I've worked with developers across 32 states doing development, and a lot of my responsibility and our group's responsibility is making sure that we deliver a quality product because we're long-term holders and we keep what we build. So
Keep what they build.
Hi, I'm Melena Thompson. I am with our construction arm, so Flaherty & Collins Construction. I've spent 20 years in the construction industry. A good chunk of that was with Turner Construction on the commercial side. About 4 years ago, transitioned to multifamily with Flaherty & Collins. For our construction team, myself, Mike Fox, and Jason Shutley make up our executive team supporting our project teams. We have in-house estimating and pre-con services, as well as then project management. And we act both in a CM at risk capacity as well as CM as agent or owner's rep, depending on the market and the needs of the project. So we've got experience in all facets of construction.
Is somebody, how do we run the slides? Oh, you got it? Okay.
Got it.
Great.
It's counterintuitive. Everybody wants to point at the screen, but the receiver's back here.
Oh, bad.
So
Okay.
if you just
All
tell
right.
him, he can.
Just a little. So I started the company 30 years ago with Jerry Collins. We've grown to, we employ, I think it's over 450 people now. We're, you can see on the screen, well, maybe you can't see, $3 billion in development, 82 different developments, and we actually operate about 15,000 units today. We own most of those, but we do third-party management. We don't really build much for anybody, and we don't develop for anybody except ourselves. So we are, what I say, probably the only company in the country that all they do are public-private partnerships, and they're all multifamily orientated. We have some that have a little bit of retail, but you'll never see us out doing just a hotel or just a strip center. It's always got to be multifamily based. And I say multifamily, we have an affordable division, so we're a little bit unique in the sense we do some of the most high-end properties, but we also have an affordable division, and we've been ranked nationally on the affordable side as well as the market rate side. Next slide, please. So this is, and then a little more on the company. The fact that all we do is really this type of development. So when we, I guess, put the team together, it's all Flaherty and Collins. So it's not like we got to go out and go, oh, we need this person, or who can they be on it, or who's our money person, or who's this or who's that. This is what we do. It's all we do. We do it all day long. So I think that's a kind of a real advantage on why we get selected a lot of times. It just lowers the risk of what's going to go wrong, or they haven't worked, or they've done something together, or is this a side business, or what? This is our business. We thought this was interesting with population. A lot of developers, they may do in Denver or Kansas City or, just the big cities. Well, here, and we can't quite read all of these, but you can see the population and the household incomes. And so Salina's down there at the bottom, but then I think what do we have there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have over 10 different cities that are similar in size and incomes. So it's not like, we're used to coming into places where we're kind of trailblazers, where our rents will be higher than anybody else's, but we can tell our lenders, look at the last 10 deals we've done. We've done it, we've proven we can do it, and it makes life a lot easier when you have the track record we do in developing of cities of this size. The other thing is here, just a comparison. These are some of the other deals. So we do the dollar volume wise. I think this is just recent developments that we've done in similar sized cities. So this isn't counting Kansas City and Chicago and some of the bigger cities. These are similar sized cities that we've recently done that I think adds up to 370 million. Pushing about 2,000 units. So our deals are good sized deals. So, a $100 million development is not an unusual sized development for us. Next slide, please. The other thing I think is important, especially when we talked to you 2 weeks ago, the world had gotten worse than a year before that, and then in the last 2 weeks, with all of the things going on in the banking world, things are crazier than they've ever been. And we've been talking to all of our banks, but the fact, here again, this is what we do. You can just see all the different banks where we've borrowed money, and we've borrowed money for deals like this, these public-private partnerships that are all multifamily orientated. Now, some of the ones on here are affordable. So that's a little bit different mechanism where you use credits and different things like that. And the other thing, you won't see Flaherty and Collins as, oh, we've partnered with this group and this group and this group, and we're all working together as kind of joint venture developers or whatever. We don't need to do that. The only time we do that is on the affordable, and in the affordable, oftentimes there's a not-for-profit as a partner, and that's part of the requirement. So we don't do that on the market rate side because we don't have to, but we do it on the affordable side because that's usually part of what the rules say. So this is just more of, it's a long list, so you can see more of our lenders and the size of deals we've done. And this also gives, the public-private world, TIF is the most common tool, but there's, we've used, you name it, we've used every possible tool that we can in order to make the developments work economically, especially when you're trailblazing in markets where there's not necessarily the proven rents that we think we'll achieve. Then, Ryan, you're okay. My partner Ryan's going to take it from here. All right.
We're going to keep you guys busy with a lot of interchanging today, but I think part of the request today was to show, and I know we talked about some of this last time in our last presentation, was to show 2 projects that were similar to what we're proposing here in Salina. And this first project I'm going to show you is maybe not similar in market. It's based in Cincinnati, Ohio. But it is a 452-unit project. I'll call it more of a garden-style product. It's non-elevator, non-structured parking, all-surface parking. The deal's unique in that, and a lot of our projects, when we go to cities, we tell them typically we want to do a minimum 200 units, and that's for operational purposes. It's easier to manage, easier to operate. We start working with lenders, the higher you go, the more nervous they get, because you start building too much, it starts to get nervous in terms of lease up and how that impacts the loan. But this gives you an example of a 450-unit deal that we did in Cincinnati. We recently did one in Kansas City, as well. That was a 420-unit deal on the riverfront, and we're working on some various in 300-unit capacities as well. So 500-unit projects are large, they're big, they're complicated, but we're obviously capable of doing that. But again, this one is all surface park. It's got all the amenities that we'd be proposing here in terms of high-level fitness, high-level outdoor space. This one just happens to be in a market that's a little more dense than what we are here in Salina. The next one, that was also Silver LEED certified, I forgot. And we talked about this one as well. This was a 224-unit project, but this was in Gladstone, Missouri. This is similar in that Gladstone hadn't had new housing in, I think it was 40 years at the time we proposed this. So we came in and met the city. They said, hey, we need housing. Our goal is to get people to move in here and stay here and then eventually buy houses here. And at the time, honestly, I'd never even heard of Gladstone when we did it. But, we're driving through and looking at it, and we had developers kind of saying, what the hell are you doing in Gladstone? You should be focused on Kansas City. Well, we ended up getting a public-private partnership with the city, 224 units, 10,000 feet of commercial space. The interesting thing here was the city said, hey, and because we're very workable in terms of, we're trying to meet their goals, trying to meet our goals. And the project was back off of Main Street. It wasn't necessarily right on Main Street. And the city kept saying, we need more commercial space in town. Our risk tolerance was a little bit lower than theirs. They wanted to build 10,000 feet. We figured out an agreement that worked for both of us. Ultimately, we got Summit Grill in there, and I think that Summit Grill is like the second or third best in their whole portfolio. So it was a huge success. But their vision in terms of saying commercial is going to work here, we said, okay, let's do it. We knew the apartments were going to work. It was just going to be at what rent they were. That project we still hold today. We've got permanent debt on it, and it stays around 95% occupied. So the similarities in that one really have to do with not a lot of housing in a long, long time. I think when we opened that property, David, you tell me, but I think it was like 70% of the people that were moving in were from outside of Gladstone. And they were finding that when they were leaving the apartments, 50% were staying in the city. So the city got exactly what they want, and it worked out for us as well. So those were two that I thought had a lot of similarities and different aspects than what we're proposing here. And I'm going to come back to you in a minute. We're going to bring David Wingerson up here to talk about the site we're talking about in Salina, which is probably more fun than Gladstone. So.
Yes, I think it will be more fun than Gladstone. And I'm originally from Gladstone, so. So our project site is located off Magnolia and Ohio Street. You guys are probably all familiar with the Cedarhurst Senior Living Facility, so it's all of the property back behind, which you can see a little bit better here. This is kind of an outline map of the parcels that we would be acquiring. If you go to the next slide, in our RFP submission, we were at 424 units. We expressed the need that we wanted to be at 500 units. You guys wanted us to be at 500 units. That's the mark that we wanted. We have this big white gap kind of in the middle there that we've since went back to the seller. We've signed an LOI to purchase that site as well. So if you go to the next slide here, we're now at 500 units across 3 different building types. We have 3 stories, 2 stories, and we've added 16 additional townhomes that are all lakefront townhomes. So with that, there's a little bit more green space incorporated. I know Ryan wants to come back and speak a little bit on the amenities package that'll be with the project.
Yeah, this is some of the more exciting stuff, but yeah, 500 units. So this is, as he just said, it's a combination of townhome product. I want to be clear, this can change as maybe if the city wants to see different aspects to it. If we want more townhomes, less townhomes, more 2 bedrooms. A lot of our projects today, we're typically doing 70% studios and 1s, 30% 2 bedrooms. This project that we're proposing here is, I think we're at 0 studios and more of a 1, 2, 3 bedroom product. I think we're over 50% 2 and 3. I think the thought here is we're definitely going to get more families than what we would typically get at a typical location, more working families that would fit the demographic profile. So a lot of urban projects are smaller units. Here we're looking at probably larger units and more 2, 3 bedroom. But if you look at the plan right now, the idea is lots of green space and lots of stuff to do outside that doesn't exist in Salina right now. And I think what we've created here is you'll see we've got I'll call it a walking / fitness trail that goes around the entire property right now. I was curious what the distance was, and I was going to ask the architect, but it looks pretty long. But fitness trail, we've got an outdoor playground, we've got an outdoor fitness park. We're going to have multiple places where people can have outdoor kitchens. So in between those buildings where it's easy for people to get to, we'll probably have the grills in between the buildings for easy walkability access to those spots. We're going to try to energize the lakefront as much as we can. The lake looks fantastic, and after going out there again today, it looks like a great fishing lake. So how we can interact with that's going to be cool. And then we'll have in the middle a clubhouse with pool, outdoor fitness, and indoor fitness. So we'll have a fitness center that will be, for 500 units, is going to be pretty big. It'll be big enough where people won't need to get a gym membership, because we'll have everything they need right there in the property. All surface parked for this, and we'll probably have a lot of tuck-under garages as well as garage opportunities for people if they want to rent garage space, they can garage, but it's not structured garage. It'll be detached garage spaces. Mr. Keith's going to come up, talk architecture, and I'll be back. You can go to the next slide.
So to date, we've engaged Hafer to look at this property and come up with some ideas of what the direction could be. As Ryan said, we obviously always want everybody's input, community, and both you all's in direction of what you would like to see delivered. We thought as a first step of proposal, looking at something that within the 2- and 3-story structures could be potentially more of a modern take, looking at, since we're also long-term holders, what would be more timeless and kind of looking down the route of the future. There's a lot more opportunities that you guys have taken through downtown with the progression of what is now and what will be down the future, and we want to take a little bit more of a softer step towards that. So the integration of materials here, there's the exterior cladding pieces that would be potential of stone and masonry facades, larger cementatious panel facades, larger scale, board and batten lap with metal accents. We would typically do a longer hold window, which would be fiberglass material. I think at the outside, you'd also see the asphalt shingles. The other story with us being long-term hold and us being the operator and maintainer of this is when we get to sheathing, as we do zip wall, we don't do Tyvek. And so there's a lot more that we take care of from an internal design and construction delivery team, where we want to make sure that we're delivering a long-term product, not only for ourselves, but the community. You can flip a couple more slides. There's a couple other additional views based upon potential time of days, and then potentially what the interaction of the lakefront there to the further east side of the property could be. Brian, you want me to talk about some of the slides here? So these are some other kind of similar projects that have complementing features, probably of a similar scale. You've seen some of the Oakley Station where we engage multiple kinds of stonework and brick facades as a portion of that. Looking and interacting, Oakley was a great example of taking note of what else was happening in development around the community and what the desires of the local jurisdiction would be. The top left there is Stonewater. It's a property in northern Indiana where those are at the outfront townhome with opportunity of live work. And so we know we're it needs to drive higher end materials and a better look for delivery towards the community. We want to do those things where a lot of other maybe merchant builders wouldn't do that. The mill down at the bottom center has some different types of material where we provided wood looks, but it's a longevity with a more modern base material outside of a long maintenance wood cycle. And that has been a very successful two-phase project as well. That's 460 plus units. So I think maybe there's one more slide, and then Ryan's going to go over amenities.
So the amenity features would be really on par with what we're doing on all of our projects. And candidly, when we design our amenities, there's a lot of things that are the same from project to project, but we also go, all right, in this market particular, is there other things differently we should be doing that we haven't done in the past? What you see on this list is a lot of stuff that I would say is our typical amenity package you'll see in almost all of our properties. Not necessarily a rooftop pool, but definitely definitely a pool. But, you know, like bikes and stuff, that stuff's important. We have bike storage. We put bike repair, all the bike repair stuff, pumps in our properties now. Pets are becoming bigger and bigger part of our projects. It's almost like they're one of our tenants now. And so we test dogs when they come in, so therefore we don't have waste on the property. If there is waste, we know whose dog it is. So all that process happens before a dog moves in, which in the long term is a big deal. I mean, trust me, we see properties where it can get crazy. And we've got properties that up to 50% of the units have a pet now. So it's gotten to be pretty wild in our business how you operate that. Co-working space, just providing residents space outside of their unit where they can work. You saw it during COVID. Even to this day, we get a lot of people that want to work in our amenity space. In our Kansas City properties, we've got a lot of medical students in there, for example, and they try to find conference room space. They use those conference rooms. They do study groups and all that kind of stuff. And you get people who just want to be out of their unit and do it. So that, I'll call it co-working space, is always important. Whether it's billiards or other stuff, it says media lounge, some other stuff we're kind of tinkering around with right now is building a podcast room and stuff like that. That's something we're seeing that kids want now. Maybe not something on this property, but what I'm trying to explain to you is what our thought process goes into this. So we're going to look at Salina and say, all right, what's our typical resident profile going to be, and what are the amenities that they're going to use? Not just the ones that are going to look good on paper and sound good, but which ones are they actually going to use? We may put, we've got grills. We might put, I don't know how it is in Kansas, but I know Kansas City's big on barbecue. We might put a big smoker station in, and people can use those smokers as opposed to just traditional grills and stuff like that, which we have done in Kansas City. Obviously, we've got package rooms, leasing office, and you can see typical finish of the unit types, which is, quartz countertops and all the appliances and washer dryer and all that fun stuff. If you go to the next page, you'll see some pictures. These are all some recent properties we've done. The one on the left, you'll see we actually put pickleball in. That's become a super growing sport. We've done that, I think, 3 or 4 times now. Very popular. Probably something we'd want to do here because it is a popular amenity. But you can just see here there's indoor amenity stuff, shuffleboard, billiards. We do that a lot of times as well. And then on the right bottom corner, you'll see the outdoor grill with outdoor TVs. Sometimes we do hot tubs, sometimes we do saunas. It just depends on what that particular renter profile is. If you go to the next one as well. You can see the top left, the bike storage with bike equipment. Bottom left is the dog spa. I think they spell it S-P-A-W, but we always put the wash station in or a dog spa for our residents as well, in addition to the outdoor dog park space. So this project we would definitely have focused on a large outdoor piece of this being a dog park for the residents. Obviously, top center, fitness. Bottom right, dog park, and then top right is another courtyard, and that one's actually got a putting green in it and stuff, and in addition to the pool. So the amenities here in Salina will probably be a little bit unique because I do think we'll have more, probably families, more kids. So how do we integrate that? We do a lot more playgrounds and such. We've done a lot of those. It's typically a lot of our affordable projects that has more kids, and a lot of our urban stuff does not have kids. So this one we're going to be a little bit more how do we get the right package for this particular project, but it will be an expansive amenity package. I'm going to pass it back to David to go through the development schedule, and I'll be back.
Yes, and I know in the interest of time, we'll try to go through this pretty quickly here. So if you go to the next slide.
And I will tell you, you have more than 25 seconds. So we gave you 25 minutes, but we found out we have plenty of time to use an hour and a half. So the more you talk, the less questions we may have. So,
Okay.
So
We'll
I was
reset
trying
the
to run
shot
through
clock
this as
for
fast
you.
as possible to beat the clock.
if you could do that, I wouldn't understand a thing you said, probably.
Yeah. So on the left-hand side, you can see the schedule that we submitted with the actual RFP. On the right side is our updated proposed schedule based off the 500-unit plan, which Milena will also talk about here in a minute. The only real things that have changed is our construction timeline is a little bit longer to accommodate more units. On top of that, we pushed the notice of award back a month because we assumed that the March announcement wouldn't come. So if that happens in April, that would be great, and we'd love that. So those are kind of the two material changes that have affected the schedule, but you can still see that we're finishing this project by the end of 2026. So I'll hand it over to Milena, and she'll walk you through the construction phase.
Yeah, I think if you don't mind going to the next one. Yeah, so right now, how we are showing this project is 6 phases. So the total construction duration being 29 months. But as you can see, phase 1, which is the blue color in the middle, it's kind of hard to see from here, but at month 14, we would be able to turn over the first group of units, and that's about 72 units. That would also include the leasing as well as the clubhouse and pool area. So try to get residents in, get everybody excited. And then what we'll do then is work our way around. So as you see, phase 2 will be another 144 units. Phase 3, the green section is 96. I should have brought my slide up here. Thank you. My eyes are good, but not that good. And then we're going to work our way south and out, so we don't have to come back in, disturb areas where we've got residents moving in, et cetera. So that'll be phase 4 with 112 units. And then the months that you see on the screen as well, just so you know, that is the month in which we would plan to turn it over. So that specific phase doesn't need 23 months. It's just how we're phasing it and moving south and out. So then phase 5 being 3 buildings, 60 units, and then finally those townhomes along the lake. Any questions on that? We can talk about that. I guess it's question and answer time.
Almost. So I got the financial models, which I think you have in your package, which will probably be easier to read in front of you as opposed to on the screen. And I'll preface that by saying, you know, even in I don't want to call it the easier times because development's never easier, but 5 years ago, our business is never a straight line linear process. So as much as I'd like to say, hey, look at this model and here's in a nice package with a bow, it's obviously it's not as easy as that. So things change daily. Rates are changing, construction price is changing. And so what we're good at is trying to figure out, okay, how does all this get together and getting to the closing line and getting a deal done. So this is kind of how we're assessing this project today. And the bigger X factor, besides some of those, especially in a market where you don't have product type like this, is what are the rents? And we do a lot of deals, and if someone could tell us, like, this is exactly what the rents are going to be, no matter what kind of market study we do, it is a tough equation when you're dealing with a market that doesn't have a comparable product. And our lenders will look at it the same way in terms of, well, there's no comps. How do you think you can get this rent or that rent? And we'll go through an exercise and tell them why we think we can. It's not a matter of us not believing we can rent the property up. It's always a matter of, okay, what are the rents going to be? We've been really good at achieving the rents we think we say we're going to get to the cities. Sometimes we exceed those. Maybe a couple times we've gone below it, but if we have, it hasn't been by much. But that's probably the biggest complexity of the project is dialing in that rent profile of exactly what renters are going to be willing to pay in Salina. Because today it is basically a max dollar market per square foot on rents in this apartment market. Right now we've got the project at about $106 million total costs. 87 of which we've assigned to construction. It's 500 units, as I mentioned earlier. We're underwriting the rents at about $1.32 a square foot today, which I think might have been higher than our initial RFP. And they might go higher again. I can't guarantee you that. As we continue to get more and more information, we'd like them to go higher, but it's just, it's fluid, if I could tell you that. We are showing construction debt of, or I guess what I'll call the $68 million that we'll bring to the table, and then we obviously got $25 million from the state, and I think there's $1 million, and then I think we'd be requesting some potential IRB or TIF in addition to that as well. We've been underwriting this thing, trying to get between a 7.5% and 8% cost yield. I think this current model's in front of you is about 7.85%. We might have some numbers still too high on taxes. I'm not 100% sure. I think the assessor we were supposed to talk to might have not been around, but that's a tricky one at this point. But basically, we've got a project we think we can execute upon that's sitting in front of you right here. If you all were to say, hey, we can get higher rents than that, we're all for it. We want to be challenged. And if there's a third party that says it as well, we want to be challenged on it. But we've also got to be realistic in terms of what we definitely think we can achieve here. Because once we close on this thing, we got to have a model that works for us, works for you, works for everybody. So let me see here. If you go to the next page, sources and uses. As I said earlier, once, our typical process would be work with the city, get a development agreement done that memorializes everything we're required to do and supposed to do as part of the project. As soon as that's complete, we'll go out and finish our construction documentation as soon as possible, simultaneously going out and trying to secure construction debt for the property. And as Dave Flaherty mentioned, we've got an expansive amount of people that we do construction lending with. In today's environment, there's an expansive amount of people that are not even construction lending, but we still got a large group in our world that is still doing lending on deals that we're closing on this year. So that'll all come into play here, depending on how fast this moves, and hopefully, if rates go down, our model gets better. If construction prices go down, the model gets better, and that's where. Today, if I sit here and said, hey, this is exactly how it's going to fit, we might find out in 6 months the construction market's starting to bottom and this thing's starting to price a lot better than it is today, right? So we've priced, on that construction number, I'll tell you, we priced a very nice product. I think you're going to be very happy with it. The amenity package you've seen that I just showed you is something we can deliver for that, and it will be a product, as Keith mentioned earlier, that we will be not only proud of, but we'll be a long-term holder on our properties. And I may have Dave, you want to speak to any of the financial stuff in general?
Yeah, just financing, touched on a little bit, financing is so critical today, and it is, everything we do is based on this, so it's not like we're out trying to get the rich guy to come in that may have dabbled in real estate or oh, we have a relationship with this bank. We've got a long list of banks that finance multifamily deals, and it's exactly what we're doing here. So it isn't easy. It's impossible if you're not in the business. I shouldn't say impossible. I suppose Bill Gates could get a loan, but it's almost impossible if you don't do this all the time, all day long, to get financing. And the other thing, usually people, the mechanism is go out and try and raise a bunch of equity. The money here will push the construction lender because I'll do a personal guarantee. So everything I own, I put behind what we're borrowing. That obviously helps in what we are able to borrow. And then any equity requirements, I would say 80% of the time it's us. And us is mostly me. We'll hit Ryan up for some money too to put into the deal. But it's all self-contained as far as having your deal. It's not having to pull in a whole bunch of different people or doing anything like that. We're long-term holders. We build, we stabilize, we go to the permanent markets, and in the multifamily world, we can tap Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, HUD, insurance companies. They're all interested in the multifamily. So our model, build, stabilize, go get me off the permanent debt, and then go get the permanent loan, put it to bed, and then it's a long-term property that we hold forever, or ever's a long time, but we hold it, and it just produces a lot of passive cash flow. And we're in that position today. We don't the model, maybe they're smarter, is kind of flipping. You build, you stabilize, you sell your property, you hopefully make some money. Our model is not to do that, but then we also have lots of properties where some of them we were able to get sub 3% money on. We timed it just right, not all of them. And then that creates a lot of passive income for us, which is nice when you're doing deals like this. It's not like we got to generate the fees to pay for the next deal or anything like that. So, so what's next? What next slide? Maybe questions. Questions. Okay. Yes. And thank you for giving us a little bit of extra time there.
Okay, I'll start with my fellow commissioners, see if anyone has any questions. I'll start to my left. Commissioner Davis, Commissioner Ryan.
I don't think I have any at this point.
Okay. Now, the first units would not be available till August of 2025. I guess I'm looking more at Ms. Driscoll. Is that somewhat late in our projected need for some of these apartments to come online?
I mean, ideally, we want them sooner. The sooner we can get them, the better. But, you know, not being sure how long Flaherty and Collins has given time for development agreement negotiations and things like that. I'm not sure how they've built their upfront costs or upfront time. So there may be things that can happen that could bring that time down a little bit, but I think it's worth asking them kind of how they arrive at that date.
That's probably a better reason.
Good question. And then here I guess what I'm going to say, we've done this so many times. I guess the unfortunate world we live in is we know too much. We know the reality. Now, you guys are moving at very good speed compared to what we see cities moving, which is great. But we won't be slowing the process down. I mean, the plans, you can't just crank them out like that. I would advise you to have approval rights of materials and the actual plans, so nobody can just tell you something that you've got to bless it. So, and then when you're working with revenue bonds or TIFs or things like that, that takes time. Now, what we do, we sign the development agreement, or even as we're marching towards that, we cut the architects loose. If there's any, if they're dealing with the bonds or anything like that, we start that process. So we're dual tracking everything. We're not just sitting around twiddling our thumbs and then say, okay, now let's go get the thing designed. But the architectural side is generally the slowest link.
All right, I have another question. But Jake, do you have a city map where you could show exactly where this property is? I kind of think I know, but I think I'm not sure also.
Verbally, it's due east of Jerry Ivy Park.
You know where the new Cedarhurst is being built?
Cedarhurst is under construction right now?
Yeah.
Behind that.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
The road's kind of under construction now that land sellers pushing through.
All right.
Can we?
Yeah.
It's right in there.
So
the nursing home's south and the Glen is up north.
So it would be this piece of parcel here.
Yeah.
Because this is the senior care.
And seniors built, I believe, right? Yeah.
There's infrastructure that's being placed in now. It's back this direction.
Sewer and fire was all.
This would have been the lake in the rendering that you would have seen.
Okay. Thank you. I was trying to figure out what was between your parcel and the main street, and it's the senior housing.
The seniors, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And if I may, a question I was intending to ask that might be timely is just the ownership of the lake. It looks like you have a beachfront orientation, but what's that ownership going to be?
We had those. I'll let David answer that.
Yeah, so Byquist owns the lake. The beachfront orientation is more of just an idea. It's not something, we're saying we're going to do. It's just there for presentation's sake to show that interaction between the water and the property. So I won't sit here and say that we have any agreement to build a beach on that lake, because we don't. But it's just more of an idea of, hey, this is potentially how the property is going to interact with that lakefront. So,
but your property goes up to the water edge.
Yes.
And we talked to him about buying part of the lake, or we didn't. Okay. But we would love to be.
That little spur that goes up to the northeast, so that you will be buying that, and that's green space that you'll be able to use for the individuals.
And that's where we had the trail going, I believe, didn't we, Keith?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can see some stuff up there, right?
All the general property amenities, clubhouse, green, that would be ready with phase one?
Phase one, we like, management's a big part of our business, so we do this quite a bit, and they want that clubhouse, because we'd much rather lease with all of our amenities, because one, no one will have seen amenities like what we'll be offering, so that helps sell the property. And then just for leasing purposes, it's great to be able to lease out the clubhouse versus sometimes we have to lease out of trailers when we're doing taller properties and things. So yeah, that'll be first.
All right, and one last question. I thought I heard a mention of garages, detached garage. Where are those on the?
We haven't really shown them yet.
Yeah, okay.
But we want to add those.
It would be tough.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're looking at.
But we have this being recorded, so somebody.
We're looking at two options. The townhome units would obviously have garages built into those townhome units, but we're also looking at the other 4 and 3-story product. 2 to have tuck under garages that are actually attached to the building where people can still park there. And we're also looking to put some detached garages in. They're not shown right now on the plan, but we'd like to do that because I think they will be popular in this market and for this demographic.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
That's it. Okay. Question I had, maybe, I thought I heard you had 3 different types of units you were building. Was that the 3-story, the 2-story, and the townhomes? Is that what makes up the 3? Okay.
Yes.
And what's the difference between, this is going to sound stupid, the difference between the 2-story and the 3-story? I know it's 1 story, but didn't want to look like but is there something different?
So the building structure would be 2-story versus 3-story. The actual unit types themselves would be potentially more variable than that. And so we wouldn't just have a single 2-bedroom or a single 1-bedroom. There may be variations of 1s and 2s based upon what's appropriate and us fitting the architecture into the site itself. And so there would be probably give or take 8 at least unit types. We have Flaherty & Collins standards that we think are some of the best units. And I think residents will want some variation as they want to choose in the style that they live in the unit type itself.
So a question was asked of someone earlier. So are these different, is this a floor plan you've built quite a bit, or is this a combination because you're trying to get it to fit into this? Do you have to engineer the buildings yet?
Well,
to fit?
luckily the buildings are pretty typical. I mean, if you look at the building architecture as it relates to the plan, they're pretty standard. And so we have around 9 what we would call Flaherty & Collins typical properties. They average across all sizes depending on about 780 square feet. So we have a very strong standard all the way, not only through the layouts, but the materials, the faucets, the fixtures, those things that go in there.
And I guess to kind of follow what we've heard before, could someone talk a little bit about the type of materials you use, what the exterior will have, what type of interior, cabinets, countertops, bathroom, that type of stuff?
Sure. So, yeah. Sorry, make sure you finish your question.
That you could touch on. Thank you.
Yeah, from the outside in this product type, so it will be to fit kind of the economics of this project. It would be a shingled-based roof. There may be certain metal accents based upon the style that may be certain dormers, things like that as it relates to the roof line. Lower, kind of from the base of the building up, we'd have some type of masonry unit. We like that from a maintenance standpoint, just from dirt splashes around planting beds, things like that. And so that could be a mix of brick, veneers, or full masonry units. There could be kind of thin stone as we get through. Not all buildings we want to look the same, so we'd like to have some variation across the building types that would be here. We might have certain things like shoal ice or limestone lintel details as appropriate to be able to flash and transition materials going up in the building. And then we'd have some type of Nichi-Ha or cementatious board. I think based upon if this is the style direction we'd probably have a mixture of oversized lap siding kind of looks, probably some vertical board and batten. Again, if this is the style that we run down, and then we'd have metal accents around balconies, railings, and some of the soffit materials that would be there. And then from the unit interior piece, typically we have wood face cabinets, both the kitchens and the bathrooms. Those would be full overlays, 42-inch upper, so provide a pretty nice product. They would be capped with quartz surfaces. Typically, we probably have more of a single basin with some type of a pull-out faucet. So we have kind of standards within all of those material specs, and then it'd be across the flooring, leveraged luxury vinyl plank flooring and integrated within carpet within usually bedrooms. Tubs would often have tile surrounds, and some of these things we chase based upon material availability within the market and what we can and can't get, and then also deliver timelines as well within some of those things. And then most of our product also would be LED lighting, and just make sure that it's good from us from a maintenance and good from a resident from a cost standpoint.
Okay.
Do you have a contract on the property?
A contract on the property.
We have a letter of intent on the property that was just modified to add the extra land. Is that accurate, David?
Yeah, so we signed a letter of intent with the seller, and the only real condition on that letter of intent is if we are awarded this RFP, we'll start negotiating for a purchase agreement with them immediately.
We can share that if we haven't already. We'll share that with you.
Okay, and what about utilities and infrastructure? I'm assuming there is nothing there?
Actually, when we were looking at the site today, it does look like the utilities and things are coming down the road already. Or Keith, do you know?
I mean, we can't speak to what all they pulled back. There's definitely manholes and some storm drains that have come back. Probably 2/3 the length of the Lakeway Drive that's currently provided in there. It looks like there was water taps that were connection points as it relates to low voltage or fiber. I doubt that's been pulled back there to that extent. We'd have to work that out exactly what is pulled to what location now, but they were right now pouring curbs back as a feeder drive into the back end of that property.
Okay, and who will build this project?
Sure. You want to talk about construction partners?
Go ahead.
Wasn't sure who he was pointing to. So probably in this market, we will act as an owner's rep with a third-party GC. We'll work hand in hand with our team here, interviewing GCs. Who specifically, I don't know right now, but that's probably the approach that we would take.
So you haven't went that far to look at the labor supply and contractor availability or anything?
Well, it's a little challenging everywhere still.
Yeah, I know.
But typically.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, it is. I mean, but we've got two good contractors we've used in the Kansas City market. That we like. Whether or not we use them here, we'll find out. But we want to go out to probably 3 general contractors and solicit proposals from them. And typically, if you go out this early and hire a contractor, you don't really know what team you're going to get. So the team is more important than the name. Like, she used to work for Turner Construction. They got this great name, Turner Construction. Kansas City, it could be J.E. Dunn. Well, if you hire them and they put a subpar team on your project, you're not getting necessarily what's on the letterhead. So when we go out for our proposals, number one, we go out to get what the thing's going to cost. We go out to find other ideas that contractor might have that our team doesn't have in terms of how to make the project more efficient. But most importantly, we say, who's your project team that's going to be running this? And that's probably about 50% of our decision on who we want to pick. Because if you get a superintendent, project manager that know what they're doing, you're going to have a great project. But we've dealt with that before, where you get a subpar team, and it's going to be a subpar project. So that selection process will occur down the road. If there's a qualified local general contractor, we're going to go to them. We're going to talk to them. Obviously, we want as much local trade on the sub base as we can hit as well. But we'll see where that goes when we go out to the market, and we'll make that selection. Her team will get together. Like I said, because we got the in-house expertise, they can do a very good qualifications of all these people and also analyze the numbers more so than most groups. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I was just going to say, in some markets where, we are going to stay here and we own this building forever, construction, we're in and then we're gone. And so generally a local, we support the team throughout, don't get me wrong, and throughout property management as well. But those subcontractors tend to have relationships with the local GCs, et cetera, and we can find that we can leverage those better, supporting as an owner's rep.
Just one thing to add with that. I think the other thing just to remember is for us, a surety of construction is we are general contractor in-house. We tend to have a typical radius that we build within. To what Milena said is we want to mobilize as much local labor as we can. We always want to pick at a distance a general contractor that we believe is the right team, but also know from an assurity standpoint, because we are a general contractor, if we need to bring our team in to supplement them or worst case scenario take over to make sure that we deliver, we will do that. And so that's where we come in, where it's like we do the best thing for the property, but we will also make sure that we deliver it no matter what.
Okay. Yeah, as far as contractors, everyone's busy. And we're not real flush with big firms. In the layout here, it looks like the clubhouse and the playground area kind of conflict, or a green space here and the clubhouse. And the townhomes is, I guess that's a new part of the equation. Would those be owner occupied or rental?
So they would be rental. We find more success and assurity within the rental market. And with the kind of the overlay of, I think your question as it relates to the clubhouse component is we always try and integrate outdoor space within that function. I think it drives the use of those buildings and the sense of community, gives an opportunity for our property management to drive through kind of resident interaction and retention at a higher level.
Okay. And your rent prices are, you said up front, you're not the cheapest. And part of the goal of this funding that we've been blessed with is to drive rents down. So do you have any room here to move?
Generally, the lower the rents, the bigger the subsidy that we need. So we're trying to minimize the ask, but then, and the rents we've projected are very affordable. I think if you're making $20 an hour, you could afford to be in our average unit. If you put a couple together, then you could do that as well. We do developments where we're using bonds and things like that are truly affordable, but then we're getting money through federal tax credits, and that's a whole different mechanism where you got to go get the credits and do things like that. Here, at $1.30, to us, those are affordable rents. If you want them lower, it adds to the gap. But I think at those levels, it's going to appeal to the majority of people looking for housing here in town, assuming they're employed.
I guess that leads to another question. How do you screen your tenants and stuff? Do you got it?
I'll take my best shot at that. We could have brought a lot more Flaherty & Collins people. We didn't bring the management people who are the best at that. But generally, about a third of your income can go towards rent. And so we look at that, and then we check credit, things like that, if you had credit issues before. So that would be the normal standard.
Normal stuff. And your firm will provide the management and operation?
Yes, we manage. We don't, like you heard, we don't necessarily build everything. We're capable of building everything, but we do manage our own properties. The lease up is very important. We do that all the time. We don't want to really, it's, you know, we're hanging out, so I've got our people that are doing the management and doing the lease up. So, yes, and then it would be our employees that would be here long-term as well.
Okay, and you're based,
Oh, we would hire local people. We wouldn't be shipping everybody in,
Right.
but they would become Flaherty and Collins employees for the
And-
management company.
operation facility like this, how many employees would you estimate it takes to?
Oh, gosh, let's see. I would say use one maintenance guy per 70 units, so that's 10 or 7 maintenance. I'd say about 13, 14 people. It's kind of evenly the leasing and the maintenance, and then there's a community manager, and then there's a head maintenance person as well. But at 500 units, you get some economies of scale, but it's still you gotta service everybody, and
Right.
and we want to be able to respond within 24 hours to any service requests. And then when people come into the office, we want to have the staff there to be able to take care of them.
And you're based out of Minneapolis, was that correct?
Well, we're all over the country. We're not on the West Coast. We're all over the country. Headquarters, where I work and Ryan, and that's in Indianapolis. So
Indianapolis.
Yes.
I had Minneapolis.
But nothing against Indianapolis, but we're doing a lot more in Kansas and Kansas City than we are in Indianapolis.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Don't necessarily tell our mayor that, but but yes, so we're active out here, but we're in Florida and Washington D.C. and suburbs of New York City and working on one in Tulsa, so a lot of different places.
Thank you.
Just curious about, I'm assuming, is it safe to surmise, based on the fact there's 6 phases and a lot of discussion about being adaptable, that if for some reason we reach market saturation earlier than expected, are those opportunities to kind of take our foot off the gas, so to speak?
Yes, with phases, and then at least the first, I can't remember exactly how it's set up, but the early phases would all be under construction at the same time. We would like to have, because you never know for sure, but is there a bigger demand for 3s, or maybe there is a demand for studios that we're not doing, so we would like to have the ability in the latter phases to be able to pivot and kind of adjust accordingly. And it gives us, we see the demand, we see where the rents are, as well as we're doing the early units, and that helps us in the latter units.
Thank you.
One thought, and I know you're in a hurry, I don't mean tonight necessarily, but to get going, but talk's cheap, pictures, anybody can show you pictures, you sit up here and tell you anything you want, tell you about our finishes and this, and we're going to do that, or this architect did this. To me, the best thing is you got to walk the walk. Go look, with somebody up here talking to you, the best thing is if you go look, what did you build? Show me what you built. Show me these things you're telling me, and look at their properties, look what they've done, and then I'd go look at what they did 10 years ago, because that's another test. We build to hold long term, and you build a different way when you do that, and go look at some of their older properties. So I know you're in a hurry, but we would fly you anywhere you wanted to go to see any one of our properties, and you could see the quality that's there, and even talk to the people that are running the properties on a day-to-day basis.
Just one other question. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I'm done.
Were you done?
Yep.
You talking about build quality. You touched on the exterior quite a bit. Can you elaborate on the interiors?
Yeah, here again, I'd love for you to actually see what we do, but I'll let Keith talk about the interiors. But it's granite, it's the wood style flooring that we use now, and that too, it costs more, but it lasts longer.
Is there something specifically you want to know about? I know we kind of ran through general interior materials.
So we've heard a lot about interiors today and soundproofing, and I just kind of wondered if you had basically the same level of the wall structure and.
Yeah, so we on wood frames, we have party walls that be double stud with air gap between, insulated. So we have certain requirements that we need to meet from a sound transmission. And that also goes to the quality that we're going to deliver to our residents, because I've been part of other developers that are part of projects that deliver a property where people can hear through the walls. Well, that's not great resident feedback, and that doesn't help our retention. And so for us being on the managed side is we got to deliver those things. And then, there's a lot of opportunity to save cost with import product, things like that. We, since we are also the maintenance staff, we need to be able to have product that has availability to parts, aerators, valves, things like that. And so our tendency is to buy and install American products. And those are also from us as we're going through construction or long-term warranty issues. Those are the people that'll stand up for us if there is a product project or problem, that we can get those manufacturers to stand behind it. So we work really hard on the relationships with the manufacturers that we have, and trying to leverage better, stronger buying power for quality products. And then ultimately it delivers a better product for our residents and the retention piece there too.
Okay, one more. We're entering storm season in Kansas, and is there any provisions for storm shelters?
So you want to talk about FEMA shelters?
Well, we were just talking about that at lunch. I thought there was a code requirement, but the project we just finished in Kansas City, Kansas, we built a storm structure I'm assuming we'd have the same requirements here related to the multifamily projects. So
we'll look to city staff.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a state code that we had to conform to as part of our project.
I don't know that we have a code here.
Well, I'll have to confirm. It was a FEMA shelter, yeah. We actually built a FEMA in the last Kansas we're under construction on right now. It was a FEMA shelter, and it had to house, I don't know, like 70% of the units that were occupying the project, all masonry walls on the bottom floor of the project. So that was getting built in our first project in Kansas, and I assumed we'd have similar provisions here as well for this project. A little bit different because that project is one building, but it's also wood frame construction. So because of the wood construction type, I thought, again, we just talked about it, I assumed we would probably have provisions where we'd have storm shelter requirements.
Laundry facilities, do you have
Every
laundry?
unit.
Every unit?
Every unit's got its own laundry.
And does that come with it, the unit, or do they bring their own units?
Comes with it. So it's not just a hookup. We actually provide the washer and the dryer in every unit.
And I believe, I asked our city manager, I believe within the RFP that we anticipate you're going to ask for IRBs and also sales tax abatements, I'm guessing. Were there any other tools on this project that you were anticipating using?
Well, the tools that are available, I guess, would be the ones we would anticipate. We do believe that in addition to what the state incentive is, that we do have to get an additional incentive, whether it be IRB or TIF, and that's what, if selected, we'd sit down immediately, roll up our sleeves, and try to figure out how to do that. And Kansas, in the UG, we did a 20-year TIF. Missouri's got IRBs as well, which is different, but I know there's different tools for different, what's that?
The RFP that went out, you have to do an IRB. It's the only allowable one. In Kansas, a TIF for residential is in the form of an RHID.
Yeah.
So RHIDs are not applicable in the RFP, so it has to be an IRB.
Well, we'll figure it out.
Yeah,
That's what
okay.
I guess. Too many acronyms there.
Yeah. And I guess this is a question for staff. I'm guessing, does this property have to be rezoned, which wouldn't be a big deal, but is it, I can't remember how we zoned that.
I can't remember how we zoned it, but as a point of reference, this property was recently annexed, platted,
Right.
zoned. So I do believe we anticipated this having residential in this. To
Okay.
what density level? I think
couldn't.
it was a higher residential density. So that question about does it have the infrastructure and things like that, this property is ready to go.
Okay.
Yeah, and the infrastructure was special assessed, so.
Right, okay. Okay.
One other question, again, probably from Ms. Driscoll. Did our housing study update suggest that the jobs we're bringing in and the anticipated need would easily handle these rents?
I would like to check. I don't know if I'd use the word easily. The question is, can or can't they? So I can double check that before you guys go into deliberation.
Okay.
And I think, I was just thinking about the question you asked earlier.
You probably should be up here too,
I apologize, I should know better. I can check the housing study to see if these rents fall into it. At my recollection, they do not, but I can verify that before you go into deliberation. I was also thinking about your question earlier about, when does the housing plan say we need housing? Well, it said we needed housing 2 years ago. So there is that time component. So the sooner we can get the units, the better. I think while you still have the developer here, it might be worth them kind of clarifying in some of the other discussions you've had today. They have, and if I'm hearing you guys right, they have certain standards within their company, but they are going to design this product specifically for Salina. So that is also some of that upfront time you asked about, kind of compared to some of those other projects where there's a lot of uniqueness, if I understand correct, that would go into this that also has some of that time impact.
And I'm sorry, just in the housing study, when we compare rents with incomes, are those based on a single wage earner in a family or two people? Obviously,
Well,
if there's two people working, then they
income.
only have to pay half of that each. But
So the answer is it's based on household income.
Household
the question
income,
is how many people are in your household. That's up to you.
okay,
So
gotcha.
does that help?
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, we talked about this. This will be designed specifically for this site and for Salina. We've got our own internal standards because you have to have standards, right? So we strive to meet those standards. A lot of times we're exceeding those standards. But, funny, we talked about the Gladstone project. I think we brought this up in the last interview. They wanted a lot of input on what the design was, and we actually went out and toured probably 10 properties with the city. And they got involved the types of countertops and what was important to them and what wasn't important to them. So we went through that process with them. Other cities want to see, hey, show me what you got and build it. So we're flexible in terms of that process to go through a design process to the extent that you all want it. We're also comfortable with what we're going to present to you when it's all said and done. I think you'll be super pleased with it. But if the city wants to be more engaged in terms of what this thing feels like, we're more than open for it.
Okay, I'm going to look at city staff and Matt, see if there's
That
any
kinda
questions.
Segues into one of the questions I had. Jacob, if you could put up that slide. So I'm just trying to make sure I have a good understanding in terms of what's probably the most representative. I think, obviously, the thing that's most representative is the rendering that you provided today. But some of the examples that you gave, and I understand the cost impact, so just want to make sure. So some of these 100% masonry finishes are not representative of what you have in mind in Salina, correct?
Correct, but can you go point to the two on the right? So the two on the right are the project, and that's Oakley, correct? Yep. And those two are Oakley. So I pointed those out in Cincinnati earlier as a garden-style product. That particular picture showing more brick, you'll see other components of the building where it's got more cementatious siding as well. So it's a combination. We don't want every building to look the same. We're going to want variation. So you might have some buildings that have less brick, more siding, more metal features. So we have more variation from one building to the next. But the bottom or the right, the top middle, that's the main clubhouse and amenity area at the Oakley project. And then the bottom left is also that. And if you look in the middle in between the brick piers there, that's all cementatious siding in between those two brick piers. This one will be unique. I'd like to say it's going to look exactly like one of those, but those are more representative of quality. And I think the design direction we gave you today is more the design direction we'd like to go here. But from a materiality standpoint, I think you'll see a combination of what's going on here. The top left has got brick that goes up pretty high, and then cementatious siding. The middle one, which is in Mishawaka, that particular one's got brick lower and more siding going all the way up. So it's going to be a combination of a lot of this. The main difference here, most of these projects are flat roofs. So architecturally speaking, we want to do shingled roof here, and that's more of a cost expense. But I think it's going to fit in better. A lot of our stuff's urban infill, so we do more flat roof product that fits in those particular situations. This one would be more of a, obviously, more angled roof, shingled style. But I know the architect, man, he's got.
Well, and marketing obviously loves to take pictures from the main drive-in, and that's the other thing is we have fronts and backs to buildings. There's always making reasonable economical choices to that. There's the entry experience of the community that we want to make sure that we drive to, which creates just that whole experience. And so I think to that point is, you know, there's municipalities where we have to meet certain brick mix volumes, you know, for whatever standards based upon where we're at within jurisdiction and things like that. So we'll always pay attention to those development requirements. But I think probably proportionally, you know, somewhere in the 25% range probably would have some type of masonry, whether it's a wainscot or something more at the top left where it goes up to a middle or a first upper story level. So there will be mix. And I think probably the comment was the renderings are probably a bit more representational. But I also think that's where it's each of our properties are a fingerprint to what we're asked to deliver within those. And we want to listen to what is required, and we work hard to make deals work. And so that's where we work back and forth with cities and municipalities to make sure that we're getting there and getting deals done.
I noticed on all the drawing, all your staircases are inside?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just climates, it works better. There's some economies of, you know, we could do open stairs, but you end up with more insulative walls the more that you open up. And so it's a better user experience if they're enclosed, as the rendering shows. And economical and construction quality. I mean, water is a hard thing to maintain. Any intrusion and ice and snow and salt takes issues with metal stairs and things like those. And so we want to make sure that it's something that we can maintain long term too.
I don't think I've heard it come up today, but it just made me think of it. Accessibility. Do all these properties have elevators?
No. So it depends on the unit type and the property type, whether or not. So I think you'd mentioned Gladstone, right? Those are 3-story.
That's an elevator,
that's an elevator.
4-story product elevator, yes.
So we will always meet accessibility and HUD requirements within our property for market rate. So we'll have a mix of type A and ANSI-based units. Whether or not we have an elevator, that will also dictate where those ANSI and FHA compliant units will be. And so any new development will always have to meet the code requirements.
Yeah, I just wondered, I hadn't heard it discussed today.
Yeah. So hopefully all of your developers are aware of that.
I suppose they are.
But we spend a lot of time making sure that we're delivering and meeting those requirements. And we actually engage a fair housing attorney, and that to make sure that we're providing what's needed for all of our communities.
Yeah, you'd be surprised when we get architectural plans back from architects that we generally think are great architects. When you show them, they always miss something, and you give them to the fair housing attorney. And it's not a lot typically, but those rules change a lot. And with our fair housing review, we always catch little tiny things, and it goes down to the inch in terms of what's being reviewed and looked at. So that is an important part of our process. I will say, you know, going back to the rent equation and whatever those rents are, you know, I was talking to Jamie Hall this morning over at the manufacturing place. I think what we're delivering is a product type that is going to be, when we did the Gladstone product, they said, hey, give us a first-class product that we can compare to everything else getting done in Kansas City in terms of quality level. We know we can't get the rents that everybody else does, and we want to figure out how to deliver the same quality, less rent, and that's what we delivered. I think this will be a showpiece for those employers from Schwann's to I always forget Kubota, but I always forget the name of the manufacturing place that Jamie works at. But I think it's going to be a showpiece when they need jobs and they're bringing people to town. They want to attract people to Salina. This is going to be a trophy to showcase. So that's our goal. And I think as you're getting people that want to move in here and provide this element, we don't want to I don't want to say dumb the product down. We want to build what we want to build. We don't want to make it cheaper just to try to make numbers better. We want to deliver a first-class product here that you guys are going to be proud of for the next 20 to 30 years.
Any other questions?
The
over
other
there?
question I've been consistently asking, you touched on the finances, but I just want to make sure we're clear on how you approach developer fee in particular.
About that answer. Yeah, so we did.
Cut it in half, so.
So we, our typical deal, as Dave said, we're the only person typically, and our fees, we have fees in our deals. We put them in every project. Typically, we never even see a fee till it's done and stabilized. So what we did in this particular case is we just went ahead and modified what I'd say our typical fee is of 5%. We reduced it in this proposal to 2.5%. That, I think that you were asking, what's that calculated off of? It's calculated on total development costs. I think we subtract out the interest carry, we subtract out the land price, and that's what that development fee is. We would also commit in this project that we won't pay ourselves our own fee until the project's done and stabilized. So we're not looking to collect fees as part of an ongoing process or monthly as the project goes on. We'll collect that fee when we're done and we execute, and typically we'll see it on most projects anyway. We don't see it till we go out to stabilized and perm financing. You want to add to that?
No, we do these to create long-term passive income if the development's successful. So the more typical model is what can we get in construction fees, so we don't worry about that, or we build it ourselves just to draw the fees. We're more interested in working with local subcontractors, and same thing with the development fee. We have a lot of overhead. I forget what our overhead is, $1 million every 2 weeks or something. So we have a lot of costs, but we do a lot of deals. We have a lot of cash flow. It's creating a long-term value, and then so we don't mind getting no fee up until we're successful. And if we're not successful, we won't get that. Generally we're successful, but we've had some deals that haven't worked as good as we've thought, and it's taken us almost 10 years to get our fee. But the tenants don't know that. City doesn't necessarily know that. It's a beautiful property, and it's doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Matt?
Yeah, based on your experience around the country and in the Midwest here, what are any specific challenges or the biggest specific challenge that you see facing you here in Salina?
The challenge here is what we faced, and I think we used the 13 examples. You go to a smaller city where there's not the comp across the street. I mean, I don't want to say it's easy, but when you can go, you build what the guy next door built, and you know what your rents are, and that's the challenge. But I can't imagine anybody's better equipped to meet that challenge than us, just because we do that so often. So that's a challenge. Financing's a challenge today with banks, but here again, we've got the long-term relationships. Construction has been an enormous challenge for us on stuff we've built. But here again, when we have issues, we're not going to try and tap the partner. Oh, can we get money from you? We don't dummy down the property. I ante up, and I'll pay what I need to pay to get the thing built the way we said that we would. Okay. We hope the construction part gets better here going forward, though, with deliveries and everything.
Other staff?
One quick question. You alluded to the fact that you're in your revised proposal for 500 units, you added townhomes, but I didn't see a breakdown of the actual the units by bedrooms, by size, and by rent. Could you provide that just for this new revised proposal?
Do we not have that on the townhomes?
Is that this separate sheet, I think, maybe?
Okay, it's on there. I was just looking.
Because they have 16 two-bedroom townhomes, yeah.
Then that's answered. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
I have one more. Have you looked at options for secondary emergency access on this property?
Have I looked at that? No. Have they looked at it? I don't know.
Right now we haven't, but we will. That's what I can give you right now.
There is a private drive on the south side of the property that is the secondary access point for Stone Lake. I don't want to speak for the property owner, but I presume it's the available for this as well. I don't know if you have a map available, but the way we addressed it in Stone Lake was the drive that belongs to the property owner that's selling them this property.
Believe.
So you can see it on the north side of Stone Lake, south side of the aerial photo there. That was used as a second access point for Stone Lake. So I would expect a similar arrangement for this.
That's the gravel road that's already there.
Right.
Yep.
Lauren?
I was able to pull up the plan, and I have pages printing for you for deliberation later that you can reference, but the Salina 2020 plan, the supplemental update, does allow for small lot, single family, or one family attached duplexes, townhomes. It does allow for up to 52 of those in the rental category. So, or 35% of what is needed for that rental category. So townhomes are included in that. And then the rental costs. So in...
And again, I think that's something when we get into deliberation.
Are you good?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
good. I think
just wanna make sure
that's
you're-
all going to be part of our deliberation. Yeah, so.
Okay.
As far as, yeah, I don't think that necessarily goes.
No, I was going to make actually more of a comment. To me, I'm looking at these rent amounts and I'm thinking, yeah, they're a little bit more, but you guys are going to stick around and you're going to maintain them, and or you're going to worry about maintenance. And it's like, to me, it's an indication that you're not going to turn and burn. You're vested in the property. You're putting a higher end product in there that's going to last longer. Is kind of my takeaway from that.
You're right on. I mean, you can build what you can make it kind of look similar to what we're doing, but it would, and you can cut corners because we're long-term owners, and we'll commit to that in writing that we won't sell the property. And you do look at things a little bit differently. The other thing, if we're wrong about the rents, it's not your problem, it's our problem. It's not like we come back and say, oh, we're only getting this, you give us more money. We don't do that. Or even if our construction costs are higher, we don't do that. When we sign up, it kind of becomes our problem. We've had good luck with our rents. Recently, we haven't had good luck with our construction costs, but here again, not your problem. It's seamless to the tenants, kind of the things that go on behind the scenes. Our higher interest rates, that's not your problem either. But those are things we deal with in the development world.
Okay. Well, we thank you very much. Now the hard work comes for us. So appreciate your input and making an effort and taking a gamble on Salina, Kansas. We appreciate that. So.
We don't view it as a gamble. I mean, our business is a gamble, but we're very confident in what we would do here. And we also love doing multiple developments. We love your downtown. As you can see, we do a lot of downtown deals. We like this site. We want to do this site because I think it's probably the quickest, but we would love to get something downtown just because that helps all the businesses and retailers, and you have that walkability. So we'll be knocking on your door for more deals after this one.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we will recess until 6:30, and we'll meet back here.
Yep, dinner will be here shortly, so we'll provide that. Now, don't feel like you have to stay for the entire hour, but dinner's on its way.
Okay.
Very nice.
Okay, it is 6:30 and we are back in session. I'm going to look to the commission whether we think we want to come to a conclusion this evening. It's been a long day, I know. Or do we want to perhaps give city staff some homework as far as coming back to us with some consolidated information, potentially trying to meet and finalize this Monday evening after the city commission meeting. It looks like a short agenda. I don't know where everyone feels as far as where you want to go from here, so I'll just start to my left and we'll see
We did hear some changes from what was presented, and I'd like to have staff collate that. Monday is a workable time for you guys to pull some things together?
We will make that happen. Tomorrow's packet day. We are out of the office at a conference. I'm actually presenting on Friday, so most likely we could certainly do that. It would be working through the weekend and Monday. We've started with some comparison when we had the RFPs. The spreadsheet that you've been provided with each one of the presentations, just in terms of their mix of units and square footages, those type of things, that's something that we've prepared ahead of time. We could collate that in a way that you can see those side by side and kind of get a sense of that comparison. I think the other thing, if we go that route, that would be helpful, and we have the criteria that we've shared with you that we incorporate as part of the RFP. We certainly can speak to that, but I think it would be helpful to have some discussion with you about what's a priority, and I don't want to get ahead of you in that conversation, but have some thoughts there. The other thing that I would tell you is what I would caution you not to do tonight is start partway down the path and communicate your feelings about a project, a proposal, narrow the field without making a final decision. I think all that does is heighten all sorts of variations and adaptations and revised submittals. And I think it was very clear to the respondents that they need to be consistent with what they presented you today. That's what would be relied upon. And so they've had their opportunity to make their best presentation to you. Adaptations after that point would be in a development agreement negotiation scenario, not trying to react to individual comments you might make or what they've now heard from a competing proposer.
Something that wasn't completely clear to me in the summaries that you gave us was the timeline of deliverable apartments. So there was start dates and there was phases of different things. I'd like to see a map of at what point in time have I got this many apartments, so I can compare how they're coming on board.
I think
that's certainly understandable.
I think that's what we're going to discuss. So what I'm hearing here, I'm just trying to get a feel for whether we think we want to give city staff that type of information to come back Monday with stuff. And so your answer would be yes.
Yes.
If it helps at all, there is next to nothing on Monday's agenda. We've got 4 second readings. We do have an IRB request and then a contract for Smoky Hill River
Is there anything
Trail.
in the study session bracket? I remember Commissioner Davis, his wife's birthday is Monday.
Oh, shoot, I forgot about that. Ma'am, I'm sorry.
Well, see, all I have to do is just invite all of your spouses to the birthday party, and then there'll be 5 phone calls. And I think there ought to be a basketball game Monday night.
Yeah.
Not the city business isn't important, but just keep that in mind. Now, my question about, I would love if I thought we could come to a decision. I could give you questions, but the questions that I would ask would obviously give some idea about how I'm feeling about certain proposals. I mean, I don't know how much we can discuss and give you suggestions without muddying the discussion.
Yeah, we can have general questions like timelines, as Commissioner Ryan said, or verify who has ground under control. What's shovel ready, that type of stuff, I think would be the general questions we would ask.
Okay.
But yeah, I agree, Mayor.
So I can synthesize some general questions out of this, I guess.
And I forgot all about.
Can we do it in a study session, or is that off the table?
The study session is Snyder Electric in their building assessment. We've rescheduled them once already.
I didn't know if we had anything or not.
Yeah, we can. If we need to, we can.
Also have the deliberation during or the comments during study session, but take action during the meeting?
After any format would
You know,
work for me.
we can set that up as a meeting where you can take action if that's what you want to do. I mean, there's that. You could call a special meeting sometime next week. There is the strategic planning scheduled for Friday of next week.
I worry about us waiting that long with
Understand.
with what's going on. I think it'd be best. Could we schedule? Looks like Jacob's the one been working on the study session. He's the one that's going to have to make the call to him, I guess, to sell if we move the current study session. Could we start a study session? Of course, we start a regular meeting at 4. Could we do study session starting at 1 or something? I'm just talking out loud.
I can be available anytime in the afternoon if others can.
1:30 would work better.
I can make it work.
Vice Mayor?
I personally would like to get some stuff on the table now while it's fresh in our minds and see what we like and don't like.
I think.
Can you do that categorically? Here's what we're looking for versus.
Yeah, there was a few surprises.
Yeah.
Sure.
And things I hadn't thought about.
That's understand. And there's no absolute right answer here. I just trying.
I think if we, we got it on the agenda to deliberate this. If we push it off, it's just kicking the can down the road.
If we were to each discuss the proposals we like best and why, but then take no action, if we just muddied the water for the next 4 days, or?
Well, being a little frank, I guess, it appeared to me, as much as we tried to be transparent and be objective and randomly select developers, it was apparent to me that some developers were adjusting to what they were observing earlier in the process. And so the concern is, when you start to have that conversation, we open up more evolution and variations that just continue to confuse the process. But there's no getting, I don't know that that's entirely avoidable either. You're going to have to deliberate at some point. I guess my thought was, what do you need in the way of information to effectively deliberate, and trying to do that in one setting?
And personally, I want to look at everything again to come up with my pros and cons. And I mean, we really haven't, I do think I like some things better than others, but I'd really like to be able to go through each one again and put my pros and cons and what is different that we would discuss on Monday. I think if we start in today discussing, I like this about this, I think we're down that road that it's going to be hard to put that horse back in the barn. That's my personal opinion.
I agree with you 100%. And honestly, I mean, to the credit of the presentations, it's obvious everybody put their best foot forward, and I was surprised by that. Everything was well thought out, and the price points seemed reasonable. And anyway, I'm getting into the weeds. Where I'm going with that is I let it marinate a little bit is what I need to do, and kind of think about some of the more nuanced parts of the projects, and the idea of trying to come up with a decision this evening. I can't honestly say I'll be making my best decision with the finite amount of time we're going to have.
Yeah, I've taken a lot of notes, and I'd like to sleep on them, look them over.
That works. I know that goes against what well, Commissioner Longbine wants, but I think that it seems like 4 of us kind of want to do that. So I guess my next question is, do we think if we start at 1:30 on Monday that we'll be able to get to, and I'll look to legal counsel, if we start at 1:30 and we bump up to that 4 o'clock and we don't have a decision, of course, that's in study session, or I guess would we call that a regular, that'd be a special meeting.
I think we'd format that
So
as a regular
if we call that a
business
special meeting, and then we don't finalize it, and we have to go to our regular meeting, can we
Lay it on the table and take
can
it
we,
back up.
what's our options to
Yeah.
bypass and then open it up again?
As I
after we're done?
recall, we don't have any public hearing agenda items. Am I correct?
Correct.
So without that designated time for commencement of a public hearing, I think you can continue with your deliberation and just take up the remaining items at whatever point in time you wish.
Okay.
If that's your
So
thought
if I
as well.
understand, we're basically we're starting that meeting at 1:30. And if we get to 4 o'clock, we can take up what would be the more typical business items. Conversely, if we finish before 4 o'clock, we could recess and reconvene at 4 o'clock.
Well, we
So
would
if any-
recess, we'd close the meet, we'd adjourn, because that would be the end of that meeting.
Put it
Greg,
this
are
way,
you
with-
considering it one meeting or 2 meetings?
Well, that's why I was looking over your way. I
That
think
was my question. Is it going to be one big meeting or separate?
I think if you want to commence your regular meeting at 4, or at, I'm sorry, 1:30 or whatever time was designated, as opposed to its regular 4 o'clock time, it would just be published in that way, and you could make it, from a legal standpoint, I think you can do whatever you wish, because we don't have scheduled public hearing.
Right.
That
Can I make a
we would have to shift.
So,
since we're not taking public comment on this, which would be a different rules from our regular meeting, it might be better to have 2 separate meetings where it's known that there won't be public comment in the first meeting.
And the paper trail 5 years from now might be cleaner if we had a regular 4 o'clock meeting. So could they if meeting number 1, could they recess that, not time certain, but to commence when the other meeting is completed?
Or we just postpone it to a date and time specific, being 5 minutes from now.
Well, I'm sorry. When you say comment, were you speaking of basically
I think
having
Mayor's
the regular meeting, regular agenda at the 4 o'clock hour?
Right.
Going through that set of business and then resuming the prior meeting?
Yeah, I think that was the mayor's question.
Yeah, if we have to.
You could.
Okay.
If you notice it up that way, you're good.
I think that'd be the best.
Okay. Yeah, we can work through how to notice that up then.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we anticipate this whole discussion in open meeting?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, anybody could be here that wants to be here today. Yeah.
Got a question for staff. If we want to review this, some of the presentations, is it going to be available?
Yes. The intention is that we post it online. I don't know the details of what needs to be done and how quickly that'll be online, but that's the intention.
It'll be online by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Okay. Thank you.
The video will be, and then staff will upload the downloadable stuff tomorrow morning.
So, yeah, early tomorrow morning, both the video and the presentations that we'll put on the screen.
I guess I'm kind of wondering if the 5 of us can expect some feedback from citizens.
You're just going to have to say, I'm sorry, no comment, can't talk about it. That's.
Yeah,
that's.
If you're not gonna, if you're not gonna go into deliberation to to the point you made earlier, or we're going to get into discussion, if you are reviewing the materials, you have in your packet that City Manager Scragg provided the 2022 supplement for the Live Salina plan and 2021. So make sure when you're comparing tables, you're noting which one you're in. And figures 13 and 14 are both our development program prescribed that talks about how many units, what types, and what price points. And 14 talks about a breakdown of the product type. So townhome versus single-family home by square footage and things like that. So those are probably the most applicable in this. But if you are flipping through, both of those are in there and they look very similar.
And I think staff's intention would be to try to extract that out for you and give you that in summary form as well.
I actually already have them, so I can provide them as handouts before you go.
Do we need to put this special meeting time and subject on the floor in a motion?
I think that would be prudent, yes.
And we can do that. I guess we can do that anytime, but I think we want to give staff some homework. Can we do that first? And then the final thing we'll do is make the motion to put the special meeting on. And I'll just start to my left because you had a good one, Commissioner Ryan. You want to give staff, start giving them some homework?
Well, no, that was the most important feature to me, besides the question of how they described their project management, how that would work. You know, some of them seemed a little more sure in their explanations of who was going to take up that role than others. So that's a part that it means something to me, and I guess the availability of the land to them and whether they have control of it or not. So.
I guess most of my questions were written as if you were going to call these folks back up and ask them to clarify something, which is not going to be. I'm trying to figure out how to. I guess there is an issue about the ability to slow down bringing units on the market, the phasing. And only one of them had any hard data regarding West Crawford, which are referred to as the ambassador. The ramifications of not using that. I guess we'd lose the county. That's the only location that the county money would be applicable
correct.
for,
I mean,
right? Yeah.
Not to come. Of everything that's been put before you, yes, that's the only one that is eligible.
Okay. And so obviously, that's not a mandatory piece of property to use, I mean, unless we make it so. I just want to make sure that there's a match between what the housing plan says we need versus the spread of square footage. Price is going to vary because some pricing influences have changed, I guess, in the last just construction is going to make some of the prices go up, but make sure that we're getting enough square footage.
Understood. And there are a couple things going on there. The spreadsheet that we prepared is an attempt to break down the square footage so you can compare one to the other. But what I'm hearing you say is also comparing to the housing study.
And that data, I guess, is in. Yeah, just would have to.
Yeah, I think the housing study is going to be more unit types and unit mixes. I don't know that it's down to square footage.
Unit rents,
rent rates and
rents,
apartments versus townhomes, that type of thing. I don't know that it'll be down to square feet.
Were you able to read the housing study that I think the first group said that they commissioned themselves? No. Okay. I was just curious how how close that ran to our own housing
No, but
study
it's
and
pretty
predictions.
typical. Any developer is going to run a market study for any project they do, whether they're in the market or not. They'll run one for that time, and so that's what they were referencing.
But I do think it is a little bit different in that it is a market study for the product that they're looking at, where our housing study was broader in terms of volume, timeline, and all the different product types, single family, $300,000 homes, assisted living. Their housing study is more directed at rent rates and products apartment products that it would support.
So which is of more value to us for what we're trying to decide?
I think they complement each other. It's helping the developer confirm the market and get confidence that they want to invest in the market and they can perform. Then we need to compare that to what they're proposing in terms of units to what the housing study said we think our need is. I mean, Lauren, do you have anything to?
No, I mean, Mr. Mayor, I can quick hand these out just so they're there for the discussion, or they're in your packet, whichever you would like.
I have, but it wouldn't be bad. So as we're studying this weekend and the staff's putting it together, that wouldn't be a bad thing to have in our hands if you have that for us.
Yep, I've got them, so you guys.
I think that would help us to at least analyze that a little bit ourselves.
Okay.
So.
I think Mr. Webster had a point.
Yeah, I wanted to point out that Anthony Properties and Perry Reid and the two affiliated groups that spoke this afternoon, they included their market study in the response to the RFP. Now, that's not something we made a public document, but I can tell you by comparing the market studies that the city has done and the market studies that these developers have done, and Rick Warner mentioned that he had Valbridge do a market study. That's a very reputable firm. Those are tens of thousands of dollars worth of study. The work that the city has commissioned is different than the work of these developers, and I think the way to look at it is the work that the city has done is kind of a high level, 30,000 feet. Here are all the things you need to think about. The work that the developers have done is much more granular, and so what the RFP said was the city has a preference for 500 units, and so the question that they would be asking the market study guys is, hey, can we rent 500 units? And they wouldn't be here talking to you if they didn't think they could do it. So they've and it's very important because nobody wants to invest in something that they don't think they can get a return on their equity, and they won't get a loan unless they can convince their lenders. So it's just it's two different sets of studies, and they kind of work together. But the development teams that have made it this far are clear that they can do what they say they can do. Now, of course, if interest rates go up or the country goes into recession or something happens, that they have to factor that in. But I think they've crossed that threshold. And there's nothing inconsistent with the city's overall study work that would say, you can't go in that direction.
I think something also worth noting about the Live Salina plan is the development program developed by RDG with our data is broken up into 2 5-year windows, starting 2022 to 2025 and 26 to 2030. Life can't always be broken down into perfect 5-year windows, though. So when you are looking at the program, knowing these units that we're talking about, these 500 units, are going to come some from that first 5-year window, and they're going to bleed into that second 5-year window. So if you're looking at these numbers going up, we're past that need at 2025, well, that these are going into 2026, and they're going to start to eat into that need in that longer timeline. The other thing, too, is when you're looking at the price points, I would just offer up that if you're looking at a $100 difference between a $1,000 top rent and a $1,100 top rent, that $100 is not what's going to stop somebody from renting that unit. So I wouldn't say 100% are just going to leap over, but you're probably going to pull units from that other category. So just something to keep in mind when you're looking at these numbers. It's not always a black and white. I mean, there are things that you have to take into each project and their circumstances and those dollar points, so.
That's all I can categorize into general concern right now.
And I think to follow what Commissioner Longbine said, I think some of those specific questions that if you have a concern about a particular development, that's Monday will be the time to ask those and help us make that decision. Right. So right now we're kind of doing that 30,000 foot look, I guess, is the way to kind of look at it. Commissioner Longbine?
First, I think we owe it to the developers to let them know the path we're taking into next week. They did put a lot of effort into this. And I guess for staff, what I would like to see is a breakdown of utility and infrastructure, what is really the sites that are really build ready and, you know, require minimal infrastructure. And a comparison, I guess I can do it. I got all the information here of some of the square footages just seem really tiny to me if that matches up with the housing study. So that's all I had.
I really don't have anything to add. I think staff will do a great job of organizing all the information, so it's something we can digest a little quicker and make a good decision. And thank you in advance for the extra work you're doing, because it's not lost on us that you are definitely doing more work, and it's going to be probably
it's been a
over
journey.
Time.
It's important work.
Yeah, and one thing that I did want to add is the third group to come before us mentioned the laundry, washers, and dryers in the units. We basically found that out from the fourth one. I did have Mike asked Lauren to, while he was at the funeral, to check on the first two. And if you want to, address that, so we...
Mr. Mayor, we did confirm with the other two developers, Salina Destination and 635, that their units do provide washer and dryer, not just hookup, but the units.
Yeah, I thought that was important, that we're trying to compare as much apples to apples.
They all emphasized the importance of having dog bathing areas. That was a surprise.
Yeah, so again, I guess we do have all the rent rates here on these, so I don't know if you need to put those on a table or something.
We can definitely do that.
I would do that. Obviously, we'll massage those ourselves. When we look at, and I don't know if this is a fair question for you guys, I guess based on what they said, everybody talked about that absorption rate, and we talk about if we get to a point where we're starting to have more product than it seems like we need. Did any of those four address that? I mean, one of them addressed it with a phase 1 and 2, and I know you guys have had more conversations with them. That might be something that would be perhaps helpful.
So, we have yet to develop a development agreement.
Right.
And that will be the next step after we select somebody to negotiate with. But I think that the common understanding is that there's an agreed upon schedule that's contractual. And so, if it was the city's intent to slow something down, you could put that into the contract. If it was the developers wanting to slow something down, they could ask the city whether that was acceptable. But we simply haven't gotten to that point. I think again, the common understanding is there's demand for 500 units. When you build 500 units, you deliver a certain amount of them on some schedule, and everybody said, well, that here's our schedule. So we asked them for their schedule. That's the schedule that they stuck with. Why it would be in the city's interest to slow that down, I don't know that, but if it was your judgment that too many units were being put into the market, again, I think you have to look to whose risk that is. That's the risk of the person who owns and rents the apartment units. It's in these types of transactions, that's not typically the risk that the municipality has at all, because if units are empty, what they do is offer concessions, lower rents, free rent for a period, free parking spaces, and those rents they get
doesn't
absorbed.
hurt the city, but it could hurt other landlords. Because if rents get driven down because we've got an excess amount, I mean, it's just something that I guess in the development agreement we want to be able to, and again, that's whoever we get with, we want something in the development agreement that perhaps.
So that is true. What you said is true, but I would make the observation that there hasn't been the delivery of any modern units into this market in a decade or more, and so it's not as if you're hurting an equivalent, product, because there isn't. I mean, these are all much higher rent levels, much greater amenities, much higher levels of development than is currently there, and so yes, it would ripple through the market, but it just gets back to the question of the pent up demand. And again, we can put into the agreements whatever the city desires, but we just haven't addressed that. I mean, they're not saying specifically what would happen in a worst case, and we just haven't identified that issue yet to negotiate.
Yeah, I think it is a negotiating point that can be factored in. You may recall in some of our other development agreements, we had some reopener language, but it can start with the premise that the agreement is the 500 units. If there is a reopener, it can be such that it's at our discretion, or it would not to be, we have the ability to reasonably apply our judgment rather than have it be a foregone conclusion. Or, I think this came up in prior conversation, or in kind of in a worst case scenario, only have a commitment for phase one, and then we're left open-ended for future phases. But I think it's a negotiation point in the agreement.
I'm going to look to city staff and also look to Matt and ask, are there other items you think we should have on a Monday for a comparison?
So
I think we both have opinions on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll just tell you general categories that would apply to all of the agreements. So the things that I look for specifically are financing. So, what's your ability to get the financing? And I think even more important than financing, or maybe as important, is the speed of the process. So certain developers have indicated that they can move much faster than other developers. Now, they can cut both ways. If you're anxious to get started because you want to get finished sooner, then starting sooner is an advantage. If you want to, study things and have a long process of pre-development, maybe that's desirable. But I think that's an important point, and it can cut both ways. Generally, I would say in the current climate, with uncertainty around banking, uncertainty around inflation, uncertainty around whether the economy goes into some sort of recession, speed would be important. But again, that's just an opinion. I mean, it's not a right or a wrong way to look at things. So indicating how quickly you want to move and whether you're comfortable moving faster because it reduces risk, that would be important to think about.
Yeah. And I think that probably goes along a little bit with what Commissioner Ryan was asking on the timeline, not only to do the project, but to get it started also.
Isn't time kind of a critical factor with the state funding?
It certainly is, getting it completed by the end, and in the sense of urgency from the employers on the front end. I mean, even if they had a timeline that is backloaded, what we've been hearing for a long time is that sense of urgency for the need of the housing for employers to be able to hire. So
yeah, I think time and being able to get on the ground running is a critical thing to consider.
My comments were going to be very similar. In fact, if we started the morning, and I suggested to you that it's the readiness and their ability to essentially hit the ground running. If that is important to you, now conversely, if you have a strong opinion about end product mix that is important enough that we want to focus on that and negotiate that further, then that obviously impacts the timeline. But I think after hearing all the presentations, much like Mr. Webster said, I think you have a better sense of the level of detail, whether their plan preparation and the process they'll need to go through for plans, their contractors and the relationship with contractors, lenders. So one of the questions I intended to put to you was, how much of a priority that is for you. You could look at that one of two ways. The product types that we've seen are all, if you agree, are all within an acceptable range, and we want to put more emphasis on timeline, or we want to steer towards a particular product regardless of timeline. My intent would be to try to help you look at each of the elements that contribute to that timeline in a comparison fashion so you can make an informed decision.
Okay, how about Jacob or Sean? You guys have anything? You guys have been involved in this? Or Lauren? Items? And I guess in the end, the last question we'll have to have when we get to that is, do we feel like we can get a good development agreement with whichever party we do? That's going to be the important thing. So, not sure how we'll talk about that Monday, I guess.
That's true. And we'll, as staff, we'll discuss and try to assess that a little bit. Just from the presentations you've seen, I think you have a sense of the project clarity that they have. The clearer the project is articulated, the more of a starting point we have for a term sheet and a development agreement. But I think understandably, they've all indicated once they get the development agreement, that's when they'll execute their contracts. That's when the clock will really start running for them. So being able to get that negotiated is key.
Yeah, we've all got homework, it looks like.
I appreciate your patience thus far. It's been quite a process. This was a long day. Not only you as elected officials, but I've lost count of how many times I've been asked, we have to discuss this in open session? There's this presumption of deliberating in closed session, but the commitment to the Kansas Open Meetings Act, transparency, it makes it a little bit more difficult, but it's our conclusion this is the right way to do it.
Okay. I can't think of anything else.
Special meeting.
Yep, special meeting. We'll need a motion.
Did we decide we're going to have one big meeting or separate meetings?
Separate.
Yeah, I think we'll call a 1:30 meeting. It'll be set up there where you can take action because at the conclusion of your deliberations, we would like you to identify one to enter into negotiations with. Then we'll do the regular business meeting at 4 o'clock, and if meeting number 1 runs into the 4 o'clock meeting, we'll be ready to assist you in terms of recessing that meeting to pick back up after you wrap up the 4 o'clock. The 4 o'clock should be short based on the agenda items.
So we're going to call a special meeting, adjourn, and have the regular meeting, or one big meeting?
Special meeting, recess, adjourn or recess, depending on how far you've gotten in the process, and then have the regular 4 o'clock meeting.
It'll be 2 meetings.
So it'd be 2 meetings. The action you need to take tonight is just to authorize a special meeting starting at 1:30, if that's the time that you want.
Okay. I'll make a motion that the Salina City Commission meet in a special meeting at 1:30 p.m. on Monday to discuss and deliberate the housing RFP issue.
Second.
And is Monday is that the second?
Third.
The third?
Guess that should have been in the motion, huh?
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure. We have a motion and a second to have a special city commission meeting to discuss the housing proposals at 1:30 on Monday, April the 3rd. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. I guess that means we need a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Then that passes 5-0. So appreciate everybody's time and city staff, and we'll
Thanks
see
to
you.
staff.